Introducing Kym Robinson, and you're watching for the lads!
Well, Kym, it's been a long time. It's really good to see you again. Like you were the man. You were the man in Adelaide. In the MMA scene, and like I always thought highly of you. Not only were you a great martial artist, but you always come across as a good person as well.
Thanks, mate.
I remember specifically the first time I come in because I was more just boxing. We had a little move around, and you kicked me in the head. And then so I was just like, and the next minute, double leg. I was just thinking, what even happened? So that was my introduction. But I really appreciate you taking the time, Kym. It really means a lot, mate.
No, anytime, mate. You were training with us at an interesting time as well. That's when we were still at the railway station back then. And yeah, it was a good period. We were training with some really good kickboxers. And that was a good era for MMA and kickboxing back then.
Yeah, it was like it was before sort of MMA kicked off and become mainstream.
Yeah.
I was training with you guys when that first season of the Ultimate Fighter come out, and that sort of changed everything because then it was on free TV, at least in the States, and now you can go into Target and buy a UFC shirt, mate. Totally different.
It's funny, isn't it? Because back then, I remember when I first started fighting, it took me like a paragraph to describe what it was that I was doing. But then just after the Ultimate Fighter, like you said, it became mainstream and, people coming up. I would see dudes, I go to family get-togethers and I'd see some, random dude that's mates of a cousin or something like that, and they're wearing Tap Out or Silver Star or, the MMA brands that were around back then. And then it just become really prominent. It was a fascinating transition of acceptance. Essentially, it was acceptance because before then, there was a barbarian vulgarity to fighting in the cage or, doing few rules combat. So, yeah, it was kind of a fascinating period.
Yeah, the first time I saw a UFC was UFC 4. Obviously, I didn't see it live. I saw it I think it was 1999. But when I seen it, I was thinking oh, it's not like blood sport. I'm like, oh, it's real life blood sport. I thought it was maybe something illegal or something.
Yeah, there was a taboo to it.
And then, yeah, and you were there, for Australia, you were there. You're a pioneer of the sport. You were there in the beginning. So, I thought I would
there was
start
people.
with. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, go on.
No, you're all right.
Oh no, I was going to say that period, it's funny to point out blood sport because I remember when I was a kid watching blood sport, thinking, "Oh, I want to do that one day," and there was a romanticism to that sort of round robin tournament. But then I remember I was 14, so I was 94, early 94, and picking up a magazine, and they just had UFC 1, and it was like blood sport. I think it was karate or kung fu or martial arts training, one of those magazines that are around. And I remember I was working with my dad on school holidays, got the magazine, and I remember seeing this write-up about the UFC, the first UFC, and Royce Gracie had just won. And he was this very underwhelming-looking guy, and you see Ken Shamrock, and he's bustling with muscles, and, Art Jimmerson with his boxing glove, things like that. And the guy, this skinny, scrawny guy, had, dominated. And I thought, man, that's martial arts. That's what essentially it was. And it excited me, and I thought, you know what, I want to do that. So I was already training at the time, but just punching a bag at home and moving around with my brother or whatever else, but no guidance. But that really gave me guidance because then you're grabbing the magazines and you're grabbing the videotapes. And I don't remember when you were in Adelaide. Do you remember a martial arts shop called Tan's in the city? There was
no, I don't think I do.
Yeah, it was like a really, I can't remember what street it was on, but it was just this little martial art. It was a big martial arts shop at the time, but it was one of the only places you could go to get training gear, specific training gear, instruction.
Yes, I do, because I brought UFC VHS tapes from there. I forgot all about it.
Yeah. Well, I went there I reckon it was about 95. And they had rings and some Pancras tapes there, and they were $60 or $70 when that was a lot of money. I mean, it still is, but for a tape,
especially back then.
Yeah, and then they had free fighting and stuff like that. And I remember buying those videotapes, and then paying $100 for a videotape in the early mid-90s to get UFC
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3 on VHS because you just couldn't get it. And then
Nah.
I think I guess Vidmark or one of those production companies started pumping out on videotape the UFCs, at least the first 20 of them, and you could get them at Movieland or those video stores for a brief period of time. So it's kind of exciting to getting all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I could get, because like I said, I saw the UFC 4, and then maybe at like a year later, I got the first 3, and then I could get from UFC 1 to 22, and then like Ultimate and Ultimate Brazil and all these other sort of ones. But I couldn't get anything past 22 for
No,
ages until
yeah,
it was, what was it, 37.5? There was like a jump there.
yeah, there was a jump. Yeah, when
Mm.
Liddell versus Vida.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's
That,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
great fight as well.
it was. There
Yeah,
was a show called there was Australian. There's a show back in 1997. I think it was March of '97. It was called Australian UFC, but it was like Cage Combat Championships, and it was held in Sydney. And I remember when that came out, and I got the videotape of it through Blitz Martial Arts magazine. Like you subscribe, sent the money in, and you got it. And I watched that tape so many times, and I remember because you had like all these novel sort of first appearances. Like they had a camera on the referee Cameron Quinn, and they called it Cam. They thought it was quite clever. They had like they had things like aggressometers, where instead of like like in boxing you'd have the punch stats where someone's every time someone punched, you had like the perceived aggression of each fighter, and it was like each round they had an aggressometer. It was pretty ahead of its time for the time. And you
okay.
had Chris Haseman in it, who had just come back from overseas fighting in the martial arts reality super fights. You had Elvis Sinisic when he was on his up and up. Then you had 2 Frank Shamrock trained fighters. Frank Shamrock was there. He had Vernon Tiger White, who had been fighting in Pancras at the time, and he was looking good. Mario Sperry came over and he won the whole event. And then you had like Simon Sweet, big kickboxer. Who else do we have? You had like a lot of you had Hira
Some big
Tarangi.
names.
He had Hira Tarangi, who was also a really good kickboxer. And you had these really good fighters. And then you had like I think like the guy's name was Neil Bodycoat. He was a Sydney guy. He took it on last minute. He went to war, and it was a really good show. Like it was bare knuckle, very few rules, and like I remember watching that. I remember taking that to high school and taking the first few UFCs and just watching them over and over. And I'd make these little highlight videotapes for my friends, and I'd sell them as well when I was working at the abattoirs with my dad on school holidays. And it was like there was people that were interested in it, but there was a fascination, especially with like the violence and the skill as well. But yeah, no, Australia, like we like Australians were way ahead of the time. Like we had obviously Elvis and Chris Haseman and that. There was also another guy called Anthony Lang. I mean, John Will was doing his thing in the late 80s, early 90s, I reckon it was, through when he was going over to Brazil and doing jiu-jitsu training and training in lucha livre and the challenge matches back then. There was a Larry Papadopoulos, Alex Cook. There's another Australian fighter. Freaking my brain's gone. But there's a lot of these Australian fighters, and they were fighting in these really big promotions. Like, I mean, that's Haseman fought, for example, Fedor, and he fought Alex Cook fought Ken Shamrock when he was in Pancras still.
That's
So
wild.
I know, and you had all these Aussies that were going over to Japan and elsewhere. They were fighting in these promotions, and they were fighting very few rules or around robin tournaments. And not many Australians knew that these guys were doing it. Like I remember when I reckon it was 2001. And Elvis just went over. He just beat. He in 2000 he fought in that K1 MMA show, Frank Shamrock to a draw, and this is when Frank was still hot property, and because Frank had just beaten in '99, he just beaten Tito, and so Elvis had just beaten. He just drew with Frank Shamrock, and then so he was like looking really good. So they take him over to the UFC, and he triangles and then arm locks Jeremy Horn. And this is when Jeremy Horn was like stud, And
yes,
so then
I remember that. That was a big win.
Stud. I think it was like UFC 31, and then UFC 32 comes along, and that's when Elvis. So this is 2001, 2001, I reckon. Fights Tito Ortiz. He gets his head beaten in by.
But the fact that he fought. The fact that he even fought Tito in the main event for the title as an Australian, there was no other Australians in the UFC, and he's in there
That's why he was like
against
the
Tito.
first man. And it's funny because back then, it was like the world was smaller because we were all interacting on internet forums and email combat list chains. So Elvis was in one of them, and even before he was a UFC fighter now. And so, us like non-fighters at the time were communicating and talking and stuff like that. And even there was websites like Infinite MMA, which was an Australian MMA forum back then. There was the Underground or noholdsbarred.com, I think it was, or .org, I can't remember. Before Sherdog was a thing. And you had all these little internet niche communities, and you're talking, and you'd have fighters come on. Like you'd have Ron Waterman. I remember when he was fighting, he would come on, and you'd even have all these other guys. Like I remember having long conversations with UFC fighters, but then the trolls started getting involved, and internet culture fucks it up. But this is how small the world was. After that Australian Cage Combat Championship, I remember emailing Frank Shamrock, Vernon Tiger White, Elvis, and I can't remember who the other fighter was, and Larry Holmes, because he had his own website back then, and he would reply and talk to you about that. And you're having email conversations with these guys, asking them like really intricate training questions about. But because the sport was so small and it was so developing, these guys were just happy to get recognition. Because most people didn't there was only the taboo about the sport, 60 Minutes or Today Tonight we'll be talking about how vulgar and disgusting. Now, the same TV channels that at the time were trying to shut the sport down and saying how it's it's evil, it's going to pervert the course of childhood or whatever bullshit, brain damage and all this sort of stuff. Now, whenever UFC's on, like Channel 7's bragging about South Australia's top fighter, Brando, he's fighting, the Balkan Bear is dominating in the UFC. Now they've jumped on the bandwagon. And it's such a funny juxtaposition how the sport can go from being a pariah to now being celebrated and regarded by, mainstream media and the normies, essentially.
That's right. I mean, politicians went from trying to shut it down to now putting it in the White House.
Yeah,
Talk about one extreme to the other.
Yeah, I mean, but to be fair, Trump, I think Trump has always been a pro-combat sports sort of guy, like boxing.
Definitely.
And I remember when Zuffa took over from Semaphore Entertainment Group with the UFC, I think the Trump Taj Mahal, and I think another one of his, I can't remember which one it was. But yeah, he would have the UFCs in them when a lot of other places wouldn't have it. So I think but yeah, I agree. It's definitely the place to be now. But back then, it was only, I remember when they showed the celebrities in the crowd, the UFCs, Carmen Electra was always a big advocate of the fighting. But, you might get...
Jack as well.
Yeah. You'd only get really obscure, semi-obscure actors at the time that were going to UFC events. What's that actress? I can't remember. The blonde-haired one that's from Meet Joe Dirt that, plays his sister, or the one that's in all those romantic comedy. Yeah, actresses like her were there, but not many other people were really willing to show their faces at the time.
Yeah, there's one as well that I'm thinking of. Never mind. But yeah, the same sort of deal. But I remember there was another niche actress, and she was in the crowd. She was like, "Where's Chuck Liddell?"
Yeah, that's right. I know.
And Joe Rogan, the fact that he was the ring announcer in the UFC, and it's they got the Fear Factor guy doing the ring announcing, well, not ring announcing, commentating, but
the dude from News Radio.
Now it's just, it was a big deal back then, to have someone from Fear Factor connected to the UFC, and it's just funny, how much it's changed. And it's good, don't get me wrong. It's great because the guys make more money, they get recognition, etc. But do you kind of, in ways, miss them days before when it was kind of more
I miss those days in the sense that the bigger something becomes, the more parasites get attached to something. Don't get me wrong, there's always been exploitation in that, and fighters have always, it doesn't matter if it's music industry, fighting, whatever. There's always going to be people that take advantage of talent. I feel the trouble now with the sport is there's too many regulators, there's too many governing bodies and all that are obsessed with telling consenting adults what they can and cannot do with their bodies. And so what it's done is there's too many layers of bureaucracy now when it comes to fighting. They say it's for the fighters' safety, all this sort of stuff. Look, there's an entire roster of UFC fighters that are going to have CTE, they're going to have all these injuries and stuff like that. And that's because those fighters have pushed themselves. It's because of the nature of the sport, all that sort of thing. They're well aware of it. Like, we're aware of it as combat athletes of what we're putting our bodies through. But you're going to get all these so the irony is the do-gooder mentality, and Australia is really bad for it, is obsessed with what you put in your body, what you don't put in your body, what you can do and what you can't do. Like, so sometimes, like, even when I was coaching like fighters, like say amateurs or pros or whatever else, you kind of sometimes don't know what the rules are. Like, for it, because the rules for MMA are varied according to states and national, and so there's no one particular rule set. So there's a gist. Like, MMA is a very generic term, and it's a gist of what it is. Like, people are like, most people look at the UFC and think, oh, that's the rules, but the rules have changed so much over time that I personally feel that the more rules is actually detrimental to the athletes, and it's harder because often you know, like, if you do something against the rules, people think that you're acting in bad spirit, and some, don't get me wrong, some people do, but you're constantly thinking, what can I do and what can't I do? Like, am I hitting the right angle? I'm not allowed to do these, you know, but I'm allowed to do these, and I'm not allowed to knee here, but I'm allowed, you know, that sort of stuff. I can't soccer kick now. I can't do stomps, or I can't knee bar this way, or I can't pick them up and slam them on their head. I can't do all these sorts of things, and it's because it's for the safety. And yet, when we had no rules, or less than no rules, it was a very safe sport. I mean, everyone always talks about, oh, there was that one guy that died in that Draka event in Russia. Yeah, well, okay, that was Draka, which is not MMA, which is a hybrid kickboxing style. And that dude was an anomaly. Like, that guy had been knocked out. He went over to another country and fought again. And it's like, you know, that happens in boxing all the time. It happens that's just an anomaly. And that's not MMA. That was another combat sport. So you'd constantly be battered with that. So then I get the well-intentions and the benevolence of it all, but it's sort of like, it's almost like suffocating for the fighters. Like why can't we have a league where we can just fucking fight? You know, like, there's heaps of us that want to do it. I would come out of retirement for old school, no holds barred, bare knuckles, headbutts. I would come out of retirement. I would take no pay to do that. But instead, but now it's like, oh, you've got to get this license, and you've got to do the CT scan, and you've got to do this, and you've got to. It's prohibitive. Like, it's sort of like, you know, I talk to fighters all the time about, oh, you know, would you make comebacks? It's like, no, mate, it's too much fuck around. There's too much. It's like, you got to pay for this, you got to pay for that, and the promoters, like, it's not even like the money you're going to be making is worth it, but it's all this other fuck around that's involved. Like, making weight's one thing, but there's all these other and I get it. It's for our own safety. They're talking to grown-ups who are willing to climb inside of a cage in underwear and beat the shit out of each other and dominate each other and prevent each other from dominating. But they're talking to you like you're a freaking child. Like, you know what I mean? And that, I think, is a mentality that's very pervasive in not just Australia, but the world over. And it's because these regulators are generally people that have never done it, would never do it, or who have done it but have had bad experiences, or have just shifted their brains and lost their balls or something. You know what I mean? And that's probably not kind to say, but you know what I mean? And there's too many
true, though.
But that's my personal opinion. Now people go, oh, you just want it to be barbarian, or whatever. Like, you know, because at the end of the day, every sport is going to be relegated down to, like, I don't know, touch football or softball or something. Like, if the powers that be, if you will, the proverbial powers that be, I think the well-meaning, the well-intended types of people, that's what they want. They want sports where you can't even have an energy drink before the event, because that's a performance-enhancing subject. You can't even have a Nurofen. You know, you can't have an aspirin within 7 weeks of the period of the fight because of the blood thinner, all that sort of stuff. And then at the same time, you know, you're not allowed to do this. You're only allowed to make physical contact. You know, there's going to be so many rules in place that it's going to be the essence of the sport rather than the sport itself. And that's just my opinion, but, you know, that's just me being a curmudgeon. And back in my day, we could punch each other.
It's so true, though. Just look at basically any other sport. You look at the NBA, you look at footy, like, they've made it a lot less. They've taken a lot of the contact out, and it goes to, like, what you're saying. And a lot of the people that complain about MMA in that way, they're not fans of it anyway. You know, like,
No.
it is about it. Like, let's be honest, it is barbaric, but that's the pure essence of it. Is when you think of competition, it's just, you know, one man having his way physically and dominating another man. Like, it doesn't get any bigger than that. It's
Well,
one
it's
thing
a
to
pure
put a ball
sport.
through a hoop. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
it's a pure
It's the
sport.
first sport before any bullshit was created. One man defeating another man. That's where it starts.
And there's a purity to it, and it's like ancient Greek pancration and all these other cultures. But I think the fascinating thing about it is you'll have, say, politicians, political people that are ideological, right? They'll sit down with a straight face and they'll say that we have to, like, as in the proverbial we have to go overseas and drop bombs on this region, and if we kill innocent people, then so be it, because it's for the collective good. They'll tell you that violence in an abstract sense like that, which has real implications leading to death, all this is good, right? But then two dudes or a lady, two ladies, whatever, two people that are consenting to competitive sports violence is somehow obscene and it's dangerous and it's not conducive to a civilized society. That same civilized society will literally bomb and starve an entire region and then 10 years later forget that it did it. Like, it's so absolutely obscene and bananas that you couldn't even, it's like a Terry Gilliam's plot. Like, you just couldn't even make it up. So I think that's the trouble with sports, is that there are too many, like, I mean, okay, so there's the benevolent, well-meaning people, but there's also rent seekers. Like, because every time you take a drug test, every time you get a CAT scan, every time that you have to fill out a form, every time you have to apply for a coach's permission slip to go to another state to coach there, and every time a fighter has to go from South Australia to Melbourne, every time a fighter has to do that, there is some fuckwit making money. And it's athlete, not the promoter. You know what I mean? There's some bureaucrat. It's almost like going to register your car. There's a process of people that just have bullshit jobs that are making money out of it, and you have to do it. You have to pay to play. And then people will go, oh, why aren't fighters making any more money? Well, because there's a bunch of fucking cunts. Sorry, there's a bunch of people that are just
go for it. You can swear on it.
There's people that are extracting at every step of the way, these rent seekers. And then it's like, okay, so the promoter only can make so much money from an event, right? Like, there's only so much there. And when you've got all of these other hands that are out, and there's all these other people making demands and all these other people stipulating, like, the state government might say, okay, the venue you have to use is this one, and we're going to take this much per ticket. And then the venue is going to take that much per ticket, which leaves the promoter like $10, right? And then we're going to take this much of the alcohol that's sold, and we're going to take this much, and then it's going to be this and that. And then the promoter's thinking, all right, I've got to fly these guys in, I've got to accommodate them. The sponsors are only giving me this so much. I'm only making this so much from advertising. Streaming's only X. So I've only got so much money left. So I'm going to have to bring in an amateur card, because the thing about bringing in an amateur card is people, their family's going to come and pay for the tickets, and their friends are going to come and pay for tickets. So there's a bit of, that the average person's not going to know the difference between pro and amateur. They're not going to differentiate between 3-minute rounds and not being able to knee to the head while standing, or all these other minutiae. You're not allowed to do, I don't know, a footlock or whatever else, whatever rules that the governing body at the time makes up. Like, so people are going to pay money to see amateurs who are not even being paid to play, because the pros have to pay so much to be licensed and have to do more tests. And then the money that the pros need to make in order to sustain being pros is not worth it. So they're basically semi-pro or amateur pro. And so the promoter just cannot afford to put these shows on. So the sport's actually taken a step back when it comes to the growth of professions. That's why you see so many shows in Australia, which are basically amateur shows, but they're treated like professional shows. So you don't have a grassroots community like, if you go to an amateur, back in the days when you're boxing, you go to an amateur boxing show, it's an amateur boxing show. Like, it's an amateur boxing show, right? Now you go to MMA shows that are amateur shows, and they're basically fucking pro shows with morons drinking alcohol, touching the fighters, going, "Good on you, bro." All of these, all these well-paid, officials running around, and doctors running around, and security and all that, all running around on a late night at a venue, people paying $70 or 50, 60, $80 a ticket, people paying to stream it. Whereas an amateur MMA show should be on a Saturday morning, like a wrestling event, where people are doing it and they're wearing their safety gear. And so you can see the difference between an amateur and a pro show. But what's happened is, because it's so expensive for promoters to put on pro shows at a low level, that basically there's no point to even being a pro in MMA unless you're at a certain level with good financial backing. Unless you're a nepo baby, unless you have good mates that are sponsoring you, or unless you're like super talented, you cannot sustain yourself as a pro in the sport now. And that's the reality. And that's because it's become so mainstreamed that it's not conducive to the combat athlete to compete.
You could say that about a lot of things when it comes to Western society. I mean, not just Australia either. We're over-governed, over-regulated, and it's partly why all of our governments seem to blow all the money we give them. They're
Well,
always looking for new taxes, yet, and also pushing up inflation, and then they're still in the red. It's just because everything's, like I said, over-regulated. So just like that with everything, it seems like
well,
everything's
cancer.
just ran poorly, and it goes from top down.
It does, and the thing is, like a lot of it is, I'll give them the benefit of doubt. A lot of it is benevolent and well-meaning because when people have that God complex or that paternal instinct, or whatever, they believe that they know what's best. They want to ban e-bikes. They want to ban vaping. They want to ban, video games. They want to ban. Oh, we'll ban DVDs. We'll ban everything, right? Because no matter what you do, you can come up with a reason as to why it's uh, degenerate, where it's like bad for the moral good or whatever, or it's unhealthy. Like, so you want to create a social license, which means that you can't teach anything to someone else. Like, you can't teach your kids how to play basketball unless you have a social license, because the state needs to decide that you can show them how to properly throw a basketball without hurting their shoulder, and on and on and on. You can constantly reduce everything down to a need for safety, and I get it. Like, I understand that benevolence, right? But at the same time, it doesn't improve us, like, because are we
No.
healthier mentally and physically? Are we are we better for it? Are people happier? There was that experiment in Sweden where they banned combat sports for a while, and like male suicide increased, and young men were unable to express themselves and exert themselves. Like that, those levels of altruism, I think, degrade a culture and a society down to immense levels, and it's not good. I mean, Australia, we had a rich sport history. We had like really good combat athletes and boxing, and especially MMA. Like, I mean, I was lucky. I grew up in an era where we had some really badass fighters, and we had a lot of good fight shows too. Like, there were really good pro shows, and you'd get phone calls. I'd get a phone call on a Wednesday, and someone would go, "Hey man, I got a fight on Friday night. You can?" You go, "Yeah, sure." And then they'll tell you who the opponent is and where it is, and you'd rock up, and sorry, my phone's going off. You'd rock up, and you'd go to the venue, and you do your blood test to show that you don't have AIDS and whatever else, and then that was it. But now I don't think you could have those 1 day or 2 day fights, which makes it exciting. I mean, taking that fights on short notice is never. I would never recommend it as a coach to an athlete, but sometimes you've got to do it, and sometimes there's opportunity out of it. Sometimes you get a good win, and
That's right.
and other times you get your ass kicked.
Yeah. Sometimes you've got to grab opportunities when they come up. That's why it's important to always be prepared in life in general. Um, I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but true though, because you
Yeah,
can't always be ready for the opportunity. You can't dictate when opportunity is going to come your way, is probably a better way of saying it. You just got to
that's
be
right.
ready that when it does, that you're ready. And as far as like trying to be over, I'm blanking on the word, but trying to be too controlling for everyone else's good. It's not a good way to go. For me personally, I think we need a lot less laws. We don't need to be fucking micromanaged. But what I do think, like, if you're an adult and you want to fuck up your life, go right ahead. You're an adult. It's no one else's business. But if you want to break into someone else's house, you want to steal from other people. If you're hurting other people, there should be very harsh punishments for that. And I don't think the fact that if you're 16, that you should just get a slap on the wrist. If you break into someone's house and you steal their car, if you assault people, there should be harsh punishments for that. That's what
What,
I think. And if you want to
what,
smoke weed or you want to, that shouldn't be other people's prerogative to worry about.
what you're saying, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people would be less inclined to break into a house and steal things and do antisocial, violent behavior if there were repercussions, in the sense that the potential victim and the victims at large had teeth. The trouble is,
Mm,
we live in a culture where we're completely dependent on the state, and that the state has the monopoly in
bingo.
violence. And you have a public service that is completely apathetic and may I be so non-politically correct to say retarded, where they don't even, so someone breaks into your house, sometimes people are uncertain as to what they're allowed to do. Because once again, we're overgoverned over police, like you said. So it becomes like where the most obscene, and there's a term for it, it's called anarcho-tyranny. Basically, anarcho-tyranny means that good people, like law-abiding, well-meaning people that live in a civil society and that respect others, are constantly oppressed, overregulated, and punished. But people that are extremely violent and malicious, etc., they will do as they do because they're going to thrive regardless, because they understand that they're already inside the gaps. So you've got the police, which are going to, pull you over and punish you for, because you might have done a hand signal that's wrong, or you might have sung a song lyric, or you may have not registered your vehicle in the most appropriate time, or whatever else, right? Because we don't know, like the laws are constantly changing, they're fluid. Whereas a bad person will break into your house and, if you beat the living fuck out of them because, you're protecting your family, et cetera, all that, it might be conceivable at some stage that the demographic of that person, the mental state of that person, all comes into account. And therefore, even though they're the ones that are aggressing against you, threatening you and your family, you were the one who was actually wrong, because, the state will determine at some later stage that person is in fact the victim. And you just don't know. Like, we live in a system now where we just don't know over time what is allowable and what is permissible. And especially now with some laws which might be retrospective, like something you posted on the internet back in 2010 might be used against you. And you might have just been you might have just been drunk with your mates, just being stupid, or something you said in an Xbox game in 2011 might be used against you because you might have used a slur, you might have used a derogatory term, you might have referred to a nation state in the most impolite. We just don't know. So, but when it comes to people doing absolutely bad things like raping and murdering and arson and things like that, what's taken into account is other factors other than the fact that they did something horrible and wrong. And that's because, like you said, we're micromanaged, we're overgoverned, and like you don't know what, like if you own a business, you don't know like exactly what you can and cannot do. I mean, you read every code is like, a book that thick, and then you've got to update it every year. Like you just don't know. Like, so you find out through predatory legislation where you get hit with a fine, and then, you've got to pay and you've got to comply. Like that's the world we live in now. And I think a lot of people that are not inside of different industries and different sectors are completely oblivious and ambivalent to it. And they feel that we do have a laissez-faire society, but in fact we don't. And so it does affect sports, it doesn't affect everything. It pollutes the mindset because people then become uncertain as to what they can and cannot do. So they might hold their tongue. They might restrain. Like say, it gets to the point where you're out with your family and someone mugs a little old lady nearby. Now you as a man want to intervene, but you have to now make a rational decision. Can you afford to go to jail? Because you don't know if you're allowed to. Now, I'm not saying we're at that state yet, but we're progressing to that state because, like, the trouble is we just don't know. We just don't know what we can and cannot do. And one thing that's apparent is we never have less government. We always have more government. We always get more tax.
Did you see that lad over in the UK? He got stabbed by a Sikh guy, and then when the police came, the Sikh guy goes, "Oh, he was being racist to me."
Yeah,
so they cuffed the lad, and then he bled out and fucking died.
He said, and the guy that was stabbed, he said, "I've been stabbed and I can't breathe," and they disregarded that. And even
that's crazy.
Let's pretend that kid said every racial slur under the sun. Let's pretend he was the most bigoted, most horrible human being ever with his mouth. Does that justify stabbing someone in the chest? Because we've gone from, in 2014, I'm Charlie Hebdo, right? Do you remember Charlie Hebdo, the French comedy magazine? So basically it was a French magazine where they published images like cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. And they did it to be provocative and to be obscene towards the Islamic community, especially fundamentalist type Wahhabist, right?
I can't remember it now,
This magazine published these images. So then terrorists went in and murdered the staff and killed a heap of people, right? So the political class, the media class, they all marched and said, I am Charlie Hebdo, and the world, social media changed their flag. Remember it was trendy where people would put that little watermark to their
Yeah.
social media, and they changed the French flag, etc., like that. We've gone from that where we understand that people's words, how they express themselves, like, visually or vocally, is a fundamental right. That's a tenet of Western civilization. To now, if you say something that's not politically correct, that the regime or the mob does not approve of, that you can be killed or arrested. So that's been in a 10-year period where we've completely switched, and that is
It
crazy.
happened so quick. It
Happened so
happened
quick.
so quick. It used to be, the beautiful thing used to be, once you become an adult, fucking no one cares about your feelings, mate. And it was very simple, very simple. You have to live and deal with people that you don't like, but you can't put your hands on them, and you can't infringe in their rights. You can't go standing out in the road stopping them to going to work. It was really straightforward, but it's just like everything now is just become totally turned on its head, and we live in complete clown world where it's all about, we're talking about grown adults and their feelings. you know it's your feelings. If you don't like what someone says, walk away.
Exactly.
That
But
doesn't give you the right to stab them.
but it goes both ways, because like, say, certain things can upset your feelings and can upset other feelings, but it's only some people's feelings, or certain things that are allowed to be upset. Like, there's only, like, so it's
Yes.
a weird thing. Like, it's a very fluid concept, because if you have a certain perspectives and opinions on foreign policy, or if you're religious and you might disagree with certain life choices that others make, that encroaches on those people's life choices and their feelings, even if it's your opinion. Like, I personally think if someone is the most disgusting bigot or the most sexist animal, or if someone's opinions, let's say someone's opinions are so indefensible, right? Like, I'll completely disagree. As a person who believes in individual rights, I'll completely disagree with that person's collectivist mindset, right? But I will defend absolutely their right to express themselves, because I want to hear what they say. Because in hearing what they say, it gives me the opportunity to understand that mentality, but it also gives me the opportunity to communicate, to argue, to have discourse, because I am not that insecure with my beliefs, because I will stand up and I will express them. It is only when the regime or people who take hold of politics or power, they are completely insecure and they're cowardly, that they have to pay armed professionals, cops, who are mercenaries of the state, who will enforce any law, including throwing children in gas chambers, because we know, because we have history on our side to show us that people paid to do these things will do these things. They will do these
100%.
things. You can talk to them and say, "Would you enforce this law?" "Nah, mate, I won't." But they will. How many of them quit over the fucking free speech laws? None. None. You know what I mean?
So
And that's the
true.
thing. That's the fundamental thing. They are paid to do horrible and obscene things, and they'll continue to do horrible and obscene things because they have no principles, because they are paid. And people conflate morality with law. And there's a big difference between morality and law. And that's the trouble. Like, politics is the end of principles, and politics is where basically the end game is power. And so if you hear someone who is absolutely gross and horrible, like, let's say that kid that was stabbed in the United Kingdom, like, whatever he said doesn't justify stabbing him. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, it doesn't justify
I
stabbing
mean,
him and killing him.
they
And,
got
and
caught out for lying anyway, because he was saying, oh, he was so drunk, and he was saying this and that, and then they blood tested him, and he had the equivalent of alcohol in his body, that he could still legally drive, so he wasn't drunk.
I mean, let's not
So
forget the
bang,
British.
straight away.
Yeah, I mean, the British police.
Oh
Jimmy
yeah.
Jimmy Savile.
That's where
Jimmy
we're going
Savile.
though. That's what I worry about.
I know exactly, but, like, here's the thing: like, as much as whatever government it is, it doesn't matter. As much, like, you look at the LAPD when it comes to a lot of their stuff, really horrible racist stuff that they did back in the day, to protecting Hollywood, especially child predators and stuff like that, and certain agents that were doing horrible things to kids, they will protect them. We're talking the United Kingdom, the British government, the Scotland Yard, the BBC, the NHS, certain charities, the royal family, the Thatcher regime, all of them were complicit in the crimes of Jimmy Savile. That man was able to do what he did for decades, despite many victims coming out. So anytime people talk to you and lecture you about the state and its righteousness and all that, consistently whistleblowers and victims are completely disregarded and relegated into the dustbins because the state, these institutions of power, these people of importance, always, I mean, that's how it always is, and that's how it shall always be. And people like, good cops and bad cops will serve whomever. They will serve whoever is paying them. And there is a lot of them that will say, oh, this person's really bad and I want to do something about it. But they'll be told, no, just let him go. Let Jimmy Savile fuck some more kids. You know what I mean? And that's what and that's so then when you see these cops in the United Kingdom going around over Facebook posts, or even here, like in Australia, like, oh, you're wearing a headscarf that might mean that you are of Arab descent and you might be pro-Palestine and you're in a Jewish community. That means you're anti-Semitic. Why the hell are police officers governing someone's right to wear clothing? Oh, you have a watermelon.
Especially in Australia.
I know.
We live in Australia.
It's crazy, mate. It is so crazy. But the trouble is we're so far down that rabbit hole because people are completely dependent on the state. So therefore it's very hard to criticize it. And then the mentality has become so, like, people are scared. Like, people are generally scared. A lot of people call it the chilling effect, which is where people are uncertain as to what they can and cannot say, what they can and cannot do. So they stay inside of like they stay in a frozen state essentially, and they don't express themselves, they don't push back. And we're going to see more and more of that. Like, like everything was a lot of things that were conspiratorial. And I'm not saying, lizards at the thing of that, but like, like what I mean is things that sounded conspiratorial end up becoming a certain reality eventually over time. And that's crazy. Like it's so, it's really hard when you want to talk to rational people about certain things because it's just, it's
if you take, for example, like, if you said 10, 15 years ago that the US government would basically come out and admit about UFOs or UAPs as they call them now, you'd go, yeah, right, as if they'll do that. Here we are. And it's funny, they do it and no one cares.
No, people are so over it because once again, because people don't know what to believe. Like a lot of people, individuals now, like are so used to being deceived because we're like, just through social media.
TikTok brain though as well.
Yeah, it's TikTok brain. Like, and a lot of people, because they consume so much short form content and with AI, with summaries and stuff like that now, don't even remember like 6 months ago. Like, they don't even remember trends that they might have been caught up in. Like, they might have been dabbing and, flossing and doing all this other shit. And they don't even remember that they were doing that because a lot of people, obviously not all people, but a lot of people just a very algorithmic base now. And that's a scary thing. And then there's a lot of gatekeepers in society, like through social media, which people follow, and if those people platform someone, is it an allowable opinion essentially? And then what it does is it deviates into certain niches. Like if you're right wing and there's niches within that niche that you might hate women or you might hate trans and gay people, so you go down that one. You might be a nativist and you go down that one. You might be a Christian conservative, you go that one. When it comes to the left, you might be hardcore caught up in gender identity or identity politics. You go down that one. You might be a hardcore Marxist. You go down that one. And so there's all these deviations, and even within like the individual freedom area that I navigate in, there's all these little niches in that, and then people go down these rabbit holes of their own algorithms and their own podcasts and their own thought exercise. But at the end of the day, what it does is it all ends up leading back to a lot of people wanting more laws, more rules, more regulations, more taxes, and we all end up in the same spot. We all end up in the same soup.
I would say particularly is usually one side that wants more laws and more regulation.
Well, I think both like left and right end up being the one side, because if you think about it,
one extreme or the other become
the overdoing window.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but it also becomes like you think, all right, individual rights, right? Okay, so fundamental, like free speech. You can decide what you want to put in your body, all that sort of stuff. That's very fundamental individual rights. But then left and right are pretty much the same on both those things. Like they like, say, when it comes to the left, they want to police certain thoughts and they want to censor certain things. The right certainly want to censor certain things. Like, I mean, you and I like movies, for example. Okay. it was the right that was constantly banning action movies and horror movies and
Video
pornography.
games,
Yeah, video games. Yeah,
Mortal
music
Kombat.
lyrics. Yeah,
But
music lyrics.
they don't really exist anymore. You're talking about like the old school rhinos. I mean, as far as the right side of politics, yes, they're definitely there. The rhinos still exist. But for the majority, it seems like the right side seems to be the 90s liberal, and then the left side are the sort of people that get gleeful over the shooting of Charlie Kirk. I mean, like, one side of politics seems to shoot the other side, and that seems to happen a lot more on one side than the other. I mean, like, how often they shoot at Trump? It's like every second weekend he's getting shot at. Like, it's insane.
Well, I think with the distinctions of left and right is that like say here in Australia, the Labor Party, for example, to a lot of hardcore left wing people, they would not really be considered left. They're more like centrist, and the trouble for people of left ideologies is the left wing has rejected the proletariat, so the working class. So the left wing now looks down on the working class, and now the left is basically fixated on welfare and identity politics, and they're more obsessed with the academic and corporate class. So the left is
That's right.
sort of
That's
like,
what I mean. It's moved.
yeah, the left, like left and right, they're both very much like they're deviations of fascism. They're not like the Australian Labor Party is not communist or Marxist in any means. It's more of a fascist model, but it's not a nationalistic fascism, which would say the right would be like. The right would be more of a nationalistic fascism. They both want the state to control everything and to manage everything and to intervene according to the state's needs. But what's happened is there's just very specific areas where they deviate. And that's usually on migration. It's usually on certain types of welfare reform, but especially in the last 10 years, it's become culture war orientated. So it's all about
Big time.
gender
Big time.
pronouns, race tiering, like say, like say in identity politics, like say, if you're in a HR department or if you're in an academic institution or whatever else, you will determine where someone's privilege is highest. So, a white heterosexual cis male would have the highest amount of privilege according to the theories, right? So then we got to go down. So then we got to think, okay, so would a hetero male migrant have as much privilege as a white bisexual female? So there's all these demographic deviations, and you know what I mean. And so there's actual calculations based on this privilege, and that's where it's deviated in. And then there's a desire to structure welfare on this, and then what mental health do you identify with? Do you like say, okay, so you've got ADHD, you've got this type of autism, and so there's all these sort of things where it's sort of based on the monetization of people's conditions and identity, and that's a perversion of the ideology of the left, if you will. But that's where it's fixated on, and that's because it's all come down to it's just basically what the obsession is at the moment. It's because it all comes from like academia and corporate, like the corporate structure of especially
They're
modern
brainwashed
government.
the college generation. The kids coming through colleges in the US have been they got that brain rot, mate.
Well, I think
with that
also
stuff you're talking about.
Well, we're seeing here like a fascinating rejection of all that, because like in high school, for example, here in Australia.
Finally.
Yeah, but it's an organic rejection, and it's where like kids, like say Gen Z, and I'm suspecting a lot of Gen Alpha, are going to reject a lot of the slop that the millennials and some of Gen X have been pushing on them, because they like, so that's why you're seeing a lot of Andrew Tate for a while was popular, or the look maxing stuff, where you get a lot of that incel ideology, but at the same time you're getting a lot of Orthodox Christian revivalism. You're getting a lot of people that are sort of going anti-gay, anti-migrant, and all that from within this generation. And it's not necessarily that these people have these inclinations. It's because it's the complete opposite, and it's the enemy, and it's the ideological extreme of what's been forced down their throats at school. And the irony is when instead of setting a better example, like and just basically pontificating from the status of the front of the classroom and power, these teachers and academics in the state are beating kids on the head and dictating to them And then what's happening is they're rejecting it as an anti-authoritarian thing. And unfortunately, it's leading them down to another form of collectivism, which is where they're like going to hate all gay people. They're going to hate all trans people. They're going to hate all colored people, whatever else, because that to them is a rejection of the woke ideology or the current thing. There's no nuance. There's no individuals exist. It's just extreme forms of collectivism. And it's because one is a reaction to the other. Like woke, as we call it, like the woke ideology that we understand for the culture war was a reaction and a rejection of certain, inclinations of in the past, like the white Australia policy, for example, certain aspects of the patriarchy, all these things. So what happened is these conditions and these circumstances, women's liberation, for example, went from women's liberation as in, I would like some individual rights as a woman. I don't want to be raped. I don't want to be beaten inside the marriage and all this sort of stuff, to feminism in the third wave and the fourth wave sense. So it went from being individualist and liberated from abuse and rape to now being an identity upon itself where they took over the powers of politics. Same as like Aboriginal rights, like, allowing Aboriginals the right to vote, to own property, to not be considered as flora and fauna, to actually have identity. That went from that to suddenly like a diversity thing where there's an elevated status and this and that and so on and so forth. And what it does is it just turns into a collectivist mentality, which is absolutely absurd, where people, they don't see you as an individual. They don't see me as an individual. They see us as a demographic. And that's a scary reality. That's where we are at now.
It's funny because the people that go on and on about like racism and stuff, all they focus on is the superficial. Like who you are as a person is not what fucking race you are, what you want to do with your genitals. Like that's superficial stuff. And
That's
if
the
you
trouble with it.
focus on the superficial, you're a superficial person. That's how I see it.
I
And
think so too.
I feel like we had it good there for a little while. Like in the late 90s, the early 2000s, it seemed to like we were in, there was a small period there where that didn't matter so much. That, people were sort of past that, and then bang, it fucking flew off the other side,
It goes, well, I mean, that's because I think when it comes to identity politics, individual character and reputation doesn't matter as much now. So people wear their identity as an avatar, but there's also like through welfare and diversity.
It's literally on people's profiles, their
exactly
pronouns and all that,
And that is because they don't. There's no distinction of character and personal, like personal traits. Like it's all just an avatar. It's all like describe yourself to me, and they want that gist. And as what you're saying, I mean, I would agree about the 90s and 2000s being probably the sweet spot, but a lot of people that didn't have it good in those periods might look at it and say, well, you're saying that because you're a cis white male. So therefore you were on top of the world as a cis white male in that period, but I'm from this marginalized group and it wasn't so good for us. So there's also that perspective. But I think when you have more welfareism and more identity politics like we do, what it does is it creates a wedge between each group. And say white men, for example, are going to feel like they're being punished for things that their grandparents might have done. Now, here's a fun fact, right? So if you have Irish ancestry, the Irish did not have it very good in most of the British Empire.
No, that's so true.
And they were like the labouring class. Now, if you've got Greek and Italian ancestry and you come to a country like Australia, Polish ancestry, you know what I mean? A lot of these migrants came to these different parts of the world and they were treated as indentured servants and they were forced to be labourers. They may have not have been hunted down and treated and exterminated like some of the Aboriginals were. They may have not have experienced what, say, the Chinese did. Like some of the first migrants to Australia, for example, were the Chinese. There was like a lot of Chinese in Australia during the 19th century. We don't really acknowledge that. Like we still see Asian Australians as Asian Australians, even though a lot of Chinese were in Australia in the 19th century before Federation, because they were, same with, there was a lot of, they would have been called Kanakas back then, but there's a lot of Pacific Islanders, and then there's a lot of Indians and all that like were also labourers and workers, and they migrated to Australia during the early 20th century. But they're still not seen, like even if someone is like 4 or 5 generations Australian, but because they're an Indian, they're not considered Australian because people conflate them with the new arrivals of that. So you definitely do get that, right? But the trouble is,
Dude, can I? I'm just
sorry,
going to
mate.
interject. How much? No, that's right. How much do you think of that is a racial thing and a cultural thing? Because I think if you saw an Indian guy that talked like an Aussie, dressed like an Aussie, like a lot of people wouldn't think twice about it. But if he turns up with a turban and stuff like that, you know what I'm trying to say? Is it a
I
cultural
mean,
thing or a race thing?
well, I mean, but you can have both things. Like, for example, Chinatown has always like been a synonymous thing with a lot of West, like say in America, or Australia, and England, and all that. You've always had a Chinatown essentially, and with the turban, that'll be a Sikh Indian. So even those
Yeah.
Indians who are like 4 or 5 generations, they might be a Sikh and they still have that cultural identity. But I think like when you come and identify a culture, what is a culture? Like, what is Australian culture now? Is Australian culture to get a cushy government job, to go on welfare, to get a mortgage that you can't afford, to buy a house that's way overpriced? Is that Australian culture now?
Have no rights as well.
Yeah,
Your rights
to get on
disappearing. Yeah, pretty
Facebook,
much.
to get on Facebook and see something that you don't agree with and go, oh, they should make a law, they should ban it. Oh, we should only do 10 kilometers an hour near a school zone, or people that are vaping should be, we should ban this, or we should ban that. Is that Australian culture? Because I'm uncertain as to what Australian culture is anymore.
Disappeared, mate. It's
Because I don't
disappeared.
know
We
what it is.
used to have it. We used to have it. We used to have our own shows, our own music. Yeah, maybe it might be hard to put your finger on exactly what Australia culture is, but you knew it when you seen it. But now you make a good point. What is it? It's so always demonized with the identity of being an Australian that they've stripped it away. And that's a part of how you destroy a nation as well. You strip away the pride of the nation and then you strip away their rights. And what do you have left?
Well, I think also like say if we go back to the 80s with Crocodile Dundee, like that was a very iconic movie. It was like it was really good for Australian tourism and the Australian identity, things like that. But now modern Australians have more in common and live more like the New Yorkers in that movie than they do Mick Dundee and Walkabout
Definitely.
Creek. But that Australia still exists in very remote parts, but there is a intense homogenization to completely urbanize and suburbanize that world. And that's all and that governance is all coming from the cities and the comfortable class that want to live at the expense of everyone else. Like they're they're people that are living in the air conditioned ivory towers, and they're looking down on someone who toils and works the land. They're looking down on the small business owner. They're looking down on the very people that are feeding them. They're looking down on the very people that are driving their trucks. And it doesn't matter if they're a white Ocker Aussie or if they're an Aboriginal Aussie or if they're a new arrival Aussie, because the Australian identity used to be a rugged individual, and the fair go didn't mean that you put your hand out and say, the Australian government has to provide this to me and everyone else has to pay for it, or else by the force and threat of a gun. It meant community. It meant coming together. It meant working with your neighbors and knowing your neighbors and treating your neighbors as individuals. But now it's just turned into complete dependency and debt culture and ruination. And it goes back to what we're talking about fighting. Like we romance the old school days of no holds barred and all that because there was a risk and there was a distinction. Now, and it's not the fault of the modern fighters. Like those guys are training their asses off and they're like fucking super athletes, and I'm sure a lot of them would love to have less rules and to not have to piss into a cup every 5 seconds and not have to be, not have to go through a massive facsimile list of what they can and can't have. Oh, I can't have this electrolyte. I can't have this protein powder. Oh, I can't have creatine at this time of the day. Oh, I can't have Panadol. All this shit that they can and can't have. But Frankie, who does 2 gym sessions a week and works in an office, can have all this shit. And then when an athlete pisses hot because he had Nurofen, they're going to get on the internet and go, oh, fucking UFC fighters are all roided up to the gills. It's like, it's just stupid. And like, it's wouldn't you love to see the old days of Pride where Vanderlei Silva juiced to the max, having a war with Mirko Krokop or Coleman when he was, God knows what Coleman was on, But
Oh,
when
yeah.
the hammer was double legging dudes and ground and pound them, I want to watch that. Hell, when I was
Yeah.
fighting, it didn't really matter. I knew some of the guys that I was fighting would piss hot. I knew some of the guys who were on peds. I didn't care. Why is it not up to me?
The that's when the MMA heavyweight division definitely peaked in pride then. Like, it's never been like that ever since.
It's
Like,
a
that
funny
was
thing.
murderer's row.
It was, and it's a funny thing because now that we're social media dominated with sports, fighters have to have a certain look. So fighters are expected to look like a poster boy, look, a certain way. But at the same
Yeah.
time, they can't take things. So the public wants them to look more than just the average person, and so then they can't. You know what I mean? It's a really weird paradox there. Really, I mean, I remember when I was fighting and I got dropped from a fight promotion, and I was supposed to be on a 3-fight deal. First fight was, I think it was like $1,000 main event. And I won that one. Second fight was $1,500 main event. I won that one. But then I was told that I wasn't appealing because, one, I was winning by submissions in the first round. But two, I just looked like a normal dude. Like, I didn't look.
They can't market on that, though.
Yeah, there was no market. I wasn't marketable, right? And so, I
But you think that you looking like a normal dude, that in itself could be marketable.
Yeah, but then around that time,
That's not what they're looking for.
That's around that time when what's that fuckwit? The one that was covered in tattoos that was a real horrible human being that
Yeah, I asked you about him in the gym. I'm blanking on his name. He trained with Roberto Durán, and you're like, I know him with blah blah blah. We had a run in, and you kind of laughed. And what happened with that's a
I think he went.
Tony Bonello.
No, not Bonello. No, not Bonello. No. I do know. I can tell you about Bonello. No, this other lad was is a lower weight.
Okay, someone else.
He's someone else. What's his name? I'll think of it. He's at the front of my head. Anyway, regarding Bonello, I like Tony Bonello because he was always nice to me, right?
Okay.
But a lot of people don't like him, and
I've picked up on that.
Yeah. So back in the day, he was like, he was a black belt. I think he came from certain money, but also very criminalish sort of elements. You heard a lot of rumors about him. And organized crime sort of stuff. And yeah, he trained with like a lot of the top guys like Roberto Durán and all these other guys. Like I think he was dating I can't remember. I think he was dating a Gracie.
Yeah,
I
thought it was Roberto Duran's daughter. I remember.
You're right. He was dating Durán. That's right. He was dating Durán. I'm thinking Luke Pizzuti just dated. No, he was dating
and she had
Durán.
His name tattooed down her back.
That's right.
It's coming back to me.
Yep, you're right. Yes. So the rumor was that he would work his fights, and maybe he did at that stage because he fought on XFC and he fought a guy who had one MMA fight, came in wrestling trunks, and apparently they were seen rehearsing the day before how the fight was going to go. And if you watch the fight, it looks very structured to a certain way. Also, when he fought, I know for a fact when he fought Mike Seal, that was a legit fight because I was hanging out and training with Mike Seal before that fight, and Mike Seal removed the padding on his gloves before the fight. Mike Seal really wanted to knock Bonello out, and I think because he was like really intense on trying to knock Bonello out, he loaded up his shots. Tony got him down, and Bonello was legit. Like he was a pretty good ground fighter and stuff like that. He had good hands. Now, when you get Dan Severin on, ask him about his experience fighting Tony Bonello and that fight, because I don't know if you've ever seen that fight.
I haven't.
I don't think anyone that wasn't there seen that fight because that DVD and videotape was lost because of that fight. So I was on that card and I can't get that fight. I can't get that sort of thing because, so that fight was very much Bonello gets. So Dan Severin was doing a lot of works around that time. Like a lot of the fights he was having, he was having a lot of legit fights, but then some of them were also not so legitimate, right?
I wouldn't be shocked. He had like 250 fights or something.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, it pays more to lose or to work it out. But in that fight, Dan gets a body lock on Bonello, throws him.
I remember that fight now. Fucking things are starting to come back to me, like,
Well,
because it's a long time ago, you know.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, it was. It was like
yeah, yeah.
2004, I reckon. But anyway,
Mm.
and then Bonello gets his back and he's choking him, and Dan's doing the WWF thing, like reaching out, like trying to grab the ropes, like like this, and then taps, and he's on his knees, and Bonello's got his hooks in, and he's really going for the choke. That fight was definitely, I would say, not legitimate. But why Tony and Tony would ring me and talk to me about training and would try to give me opportunities and give me offers and stuff like that, like to do interesting fights. He was always nice and supportive of me, but I didn't see his dark side, right? But then people that I do like that were also absolute pillars in Australian MMA, he would say, "Hey, brother, you know, I'm thinking about going to Elvis's gym and just raping him." And he'll say that like in a sentence, and then he'll just talk about other things. And then he'll call out fighters. And then I think he went to Larry Papadopoulos's gym and stripped down to his underwear and chased him around the gym, threatening to do certain things to him. So the legend goes. So there's that. Like, you know, around the early 2000s, like I fought a guy called Matt Trihey, and Matt Trihey was trying to fight Tony around that time because there's a lot of internet banter about it. But I beat Trihey, so he didn't get to fight Bonello. But yeah, like he was definitely an interesting enigma for a brief period of time. I think what ended his career is when he got beaten by Ninja Rua on that fight show where he just gets pummeled. And he was on Bully
Yeah, I
Beatdown
do remember
briefly as
that.
well.
And
But
that was the one fight that they nearly had the professional lose.
yeah, he got clocked.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
come out, got
It's the
clocked.
only
Yeah,
time that the pro nearly got out of there.
yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know him. I've just heard rumbles over the years, and like
Oh, you would.
for a little while in Australia, like he like you said, enigma. Like you probably can't put it any better than that. He's sort of like
And I
he
reckon
was a
every
big
person
name
would
there
have a
for a little
different,
bit.
and I think every person would have a different story about him. And
Mm,
like, I think he's one of those people that didn't need to fight for money. He did it because he had a fascination back then, like a bit like say Jake Paul and Logan Paul, right?
mm,
They're like they don't need to fight. They could make a lot more money doing Mr. Beast stuff, like selling crypto and doing podcasts and God knows what else. But they fight because there's something in them that makes them want to do it, right? And they're making money out of fighting. Don't get me wrong. Bonello is a
yeah.
little bit like that, and I think if Bonello was around now in his prime, he would probably do very well with social media and all that sort of stuff. And perceptions might be different to him again. He might be a bit more refined. But
Mm,
he was the sort of guy that like he would be the main event on a show, but he would be the first fight of the night because he hated waiting around. So there was that sort of there's that sort of thing. But we, you know, in that time, we had some really good fighters, like some high level guys that could have gone. Like there was a fighter called Sam Nest, and Sam Nest was beating everyone. He was a
that name
93.
rings a bell.
Yeah, he used to
It
fight in
rings
his
a bell.
tradie shorts. He used to fight in these blue tradie shorts, and he was fight. I was going to fight him. They wanted me to fight him on a. There was some stupid modified rules that they were trying to push at the time. It was like I don't know. I guess we'll call it shoot boxing, but basically it was like kickboxing with some throws. I desperately wanted to fight him out of respect because he was one of my favorite fighters. I would have
Mm,
loved to have fought him under MMA rules, right? But I didn't get to, unfortunately. But I loved watching him. Like he was fighting a little bit before me, around 2000, 2001, before I was fighting MMA. And he fought everyone. And I think what happened is he met a lady, fell in love, and then he just stopped fighting. But he had I think it was like 18 wins and one loss. And I think the loss was because he got a cut. Yeah, and he was like the guy. Like he beat Anthony Perosh when Perosh was climbing up the ranks in like absolute war.
he
Because like
fought in the
Sam,
UFC.
yeah, who
He
fought
was
in
the
the UFC.
man for Yeah, he was the man in Australian MMA for a little while
He
there.
was, yeah. And Elvis
Mm,
Sinisic, like him and Perosh were like top level grapplers and that. We had some really interesting early MMA like UFC fighters. Like I think Brad Morris fought in the UFC. Jim York, Kyle Noak, Soa Palelli. Can't say his name right now.
mm,
Jamie Tahuna, who I fought and trained with. I think Dylan
mm,
Andrews. Like the early before the next wave of UFC guys in the 2010s onwards, because
yeah.
obviously heaps of top guys there too that have had heaps, but like there was some in the 2000s that were just dabbling in there, and they got bad matchups or they were forced to go to weight
A lot of
divisions.
them were like they were good. A lot of them tend to be possibly having good striking, then really good jiu-jitsu, and then average wrestling. That just seemed to
Yeah.
be uh, the cutout of the Australian MMA fighter. And then
Well, I think the trouble with MMA is it's too promotion based. So, like in boxing, for example, like they have promoters. Don't get me wrong, but like in boxing, you can be a regional fighter and you can stay active fighting in your state, in your country, and make pretty decent money as a television fighter or as a local fighter, and stay active doing it. And then you might get a big payday. You might get asked, "Hey, um, we want you to fight this up and coming contender." Like you could be a pseudo journeyman or a fringe contender and be ranked in the top 50 or 100 in the nation or the world. Whereas MMA, it's you have very few small shows and you have a few fights with them, and then you jump, like you just leap to that next level. Then when you get to that next level, you kind of either just thrown in the deep end or you have a couple of fights, whatever. But then there's no place to, like, if you fail at that next level, where do you go? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's no regional circuit. Like, so say if you're a boxer,
especially
right?
back in your day.
Yeah, well, that's right. Like, so, but say like if you're like a boxer, okay? Let's say you're a heavyweight boxer, you're a prospect, you have like 10 fights locally against, the usual type of opponents, part-timers and things like that. Then you start getting your teen fights, like 10 to 20 fights. And then you fight the number 2 guy in your division in the world, and you lose, right? You lose. So your management or your coach might get you back down fighting guys with 7-10 records or 10-8 records, or or guys that are sort of like, and you have a few fights building your confidence back up. You might have not been able to left hook off the jab. You might have been susceptible to certain things, but you're having 3 to 4 fights where you're just learning to go back into it. Then you start fighting the contender. You fight the top 10 guy. You fight a top 10 guy again. You win. You're climbing back up. Then you fight the champ. You might win. MMA doesn't have that. MMA has, you get to the UFC, you have to win, or you keep losing and then you get dropped. But if you have to win, but then the next win you have to go up. And then you're constantly fed to the wolves. You don't get to have these, you know what I mean? Because it's all promotion based and it's all about the promotion, not about the development of the fighter. Now, if fighters are more like free agents, they could go off and do their own thing, get some wins, develop themselves, work on some things, and grow as an athlete. But when it's a promotion, the promotion just wants to get through you. They want to make money out of you, eat you up. And the irony is, the same governing bodies that will tell us what we're talking about before about our own safety, they are feeding into this promotion-based, this big corporations like the UFC and all that, because through regulatory capture, they're the ones that are working with the athletic commissions or the state governments or whatever. They're the ones that are working with it, and they're monopolizing the sport. So they're the only venues and events that athletes can have. Whereas if we had it more like boxing, and I'm not saying boxing's perfect because believe me, it's not, but we had it more like boxing where we could just develop and we had more fights and shows. I mean, why is it that boxers make more money than MMA fighters? Like it's obscene, like at a high level and even at a low level. Like if I was a boxer, for example, like say, especially in the 90s, I could have regular fights even after, like say I fought some top guys and I got my ass kicked by them, right? But I could still fight locally and regularly and still make okay money and still be enough until I get back into it. But I could stay comfortable having 20 or 30 fights. You can't do that now. You just can't do that. Like it's all monopolized because everything's so expensive from the promoters. It's so expensive. Like, there's too many prohibitions now. And that's the trouble. Like we don't have I don't know if you remember, you're a little bit younger than me, but you might remember you'd have, you might have Tuesday night fights in America or HBO After Dark, and you'll have Larry Holmes fighting on a Tuesday night on a as the main event on a card on free TV, fighting like a Ken Lacusta or a Rocky Papelli or someone like that. And these guys are journeymans, but Holmes is trying to work his way back up to the championship. You've got all these guys that are mid-tier and low-tier fighters, but the promotion was able to pay Larry Holmes $80,000 and his opponent $10,000 and the undercard $5,000 and $3,000 and $6,000, respectively, right? And they're having that every Tuesday night, and they're making money. What happened? Like, Like, why is it? It's like, it's just there's people still want to watch it because I mean
Yeah,
that Netflix
definitely.
thing, like that Netflix thing that just happened, people were watching that. People were watching, you know, Anthony Mundine's granddaughter or daughter will come out of retirement, or not out of retirement, will have one boxing match, and millions of people will watch it. Like Logan Paul's girlfriend might have a box off with, I don't know, Andrew Tate's sister, and people will watch it. You know, like it's people will watch this sort of stuff, but for some reason, there's just not much money in it when it's consistent and done. Like the fight fans are there, not the newbies or the casuals, but I'm talking about the fight fans are there, but they're just not given what they want.
I think with the UFC, they're in a position now where they don't really need the stars. So
No,
they're
they
not
don't.
trying to pump up like another McGregor or Ronda Rousey, or because they just don't need it,
No, they
like
don't need it because
um
I think now we're living in a world where of like I don't know, it's a form of capitalism, but it's not a free market capitalism in the sense
mm,
where a corporation doesn't need to actually provide a decent product. You might have heard the term enshittification, for example. It doesn't
yeah,
matter if it's tech, it doesn't matter if it's cars. It's all about private equity. It's all about shareholders. It's all about valuation. So like the UFC might be valued at so many billions of dollars, right? But it
mm,
doesn't need to turn a profit per se. It's just valued at it, and so it doesn't need to have heaps of people watching each week like it once did at its prime. It's now just a thing that people invest in, and it exists for the sake of
yes,
it.
so true. It's just you bang on the money. It's it's a distortion of capitalism. Capitalism is supposed to be, the cream rises to the top. The market dictates, the value of something. The market is being myself and you, my brother, the people paying money,
Yeah,
not shares and stuff. The stock market it is, you're so right. It's a distortion of true
it's also
capitalism.
because there's so much debt in the economy now. Like, so you have all these stimulus
Yeah.
plans,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, and so now
they
like
ain't
there's
paying that back.
no, and that's what I mean. Like, so there's no money has no value. So there's so many distortions to
Mm,
the market where the money is the market's full of just inflated, devalued currency,
yeah.
and it goes to these corporations. It goes to defense contractors. It goes to tech companies. Like a guy will come up with, like, oh, I've got this concept. It's called WeWork, and basically you do this, and then people invest in it. Or look at the AI bubble, like all this sort of stuff, and it distorts everything, and it's going to affect sports. Like, it's going to have so much money in sports, but the
Mm,
money's not necessarily getting to the combat athletes, at least the ones at a low level. Like, Ronda and Gina Carano, good for them. They made, all right, money doing what they did have that fight. But there was a lot of people watching. Like Netflix,
yeah.
like Netflix can make a movie like Empire State or whatever, that movie that bop that no one remembers, like a $300 million movie, right?
Mm,
No one watched it, but they can afford to
I don't know.
cut.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it was that movie that came out with Chris Pratt and the young lady from
Oh yeah.
Stranger
I never
Things. Yeah,
watched
the
it,
one.
but yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No one watched it. Electric World or whatever it's
I
called.
just,
Electric.
I'm proving your point.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
proving
It's
your
like,
point of it.
yeah, but they'll lose $300 million making that. They're not going to put it in the
Yes.
cinemas. They're not going to get new
Mm,
subscribers for it, so they can make money because Netflix is like, like maybe not as high as, I mean, YouTube I think is like 10% of the market, and the Netflix might be 3 point something percent, but they can make a lot of money just through existence and valuations, right? So then they can make something like the UFC, that show that last production. That's not going to cost $300 million like that movie that they bombed on, but
mm,
they're going to get people to subscribe at least for that month to watch out of fascination, because they might want to see Nagano, or they might want to see JDS come out, or they might want to see, they want to see Gina Carano if she still has it, because they remember her from Mandalorian, and they remember her from Deadpool, and they remember her from back in 2000s being an ass kicker. So they're going to subscribe to watch it. So they can spend less and they get more for it than when they're making movies. But the UFC, for example, is sort of entrenched. That's why I think Dana's trying to push that power slap, and he's trying to push all this other crap, because you
yeah.
don't have to put as much money into the production value. But my question is this: when did MMA shows have to be a music concert sort of level of just theatrics? Like, like it's like all the lighting and all the everything like that product. We don't need that. We just need, like, so long as the fighters are looked after, like, in the sense that they've got a place to warm up, they've got cold water, they've got they've got a place that they can walk out that's safe, they've got a cage that's decent. The audience will be there. Like, fight fans will tune in. They don't need AI generated
that
graphics. Yeah,
pageantry
they don't need all that wank.
and
Like, that wank
the
is a waste of
sphere and all
time.
that stuff.
Yeah, they don't need that. Like, like it's
It become big for a reason.
yeah, that's
And
right.
realistically, it got big because of that Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin fight, and
Yeah,
people loved it because it was a fucking banger, not because of the
yeah.
special effects around it or anything like
No, that's
that,
right.
because
Exactly.
it
And
was
what
so raw.
exactly the purity of it, the pure essence of it. And then, this is going back to the the conversation about capitalism. There's a reason why McDonald's was successful. It's because it had fewer items on the menu, and you could go to different restaurants and get the same thing. Now they've got 1 billion items on the menu, and it's harder for the franchisees or whatever. I'm just using McDonald's as an example. They do more things, but they're not as good as doing those more things, and so therefore it makes the costs go up. It makes it like but is it the consumer wants everything that doesn't really matter, or is it that it's just the corporate mindset that they've got to constantly reinvent the wheel in that case? You know what I mean? Like, and is it the same
A
thing with
Freudian slip.
It was, but is it the same thing with the UFC? Is it that the consumer wants like, what fight fan is sitting down thinking, oh shit, I really enjoyed the 6 fireworks over there and that way the lights came out. And are they really getting caught up in that? Do we need all these excessive camera angles and like do we need
Look,
all that
I
sort
would
of shit?
say no, but then thinking
Do we
about
need?
this, but this is the thing though, right? If you think about the modern generation with their fucking TikTok brain and attention span of a fucking goldfish, maybe they do. Maybe
Yeah,
they
well,
do need flashing lights to keep them
yeah.
stimulated.
Yeah, here, we're over here, yeah. Like, do we need to see Daniel Cormier and Joe Rogan reacting to a knockout, holding each other, like acting like did that come about because Chuck Liddell was so coked out sometimes that the camera went on him when he was watching fights? You know what I mean? That they thought, like they thought there's something here, or is it because now content creators are basically ahead at the bottom of the screen doing this and nodding to someone else talking and then having something and then they're saying their thing? Are we in that world now where everything's cannibalized and nothing actually is nothing's created? It's just all, you know what I mean? It's just and I think it's
Well, I
affecting
mean, if you're
sport.
talking about nothing being created anymore, you just look at Hollywood. I mean,
Yeah,
all they do is rehash old movies that came out decades ago and do a really poor job of it.
yeah.
And they
They
just
lean
rinse and
into
repeat,
nostalgia or yeah.
lose money. Let's do it again, rinse and repeat, lose more money. It's just like,
Well, I mean,
doesn't
even the
seem
fight,
like a great strategy, like.
it doesn't. I mean, even in a way, the fight world's sort of infected with this because, like, we just had Ronda Rousey, who's been retired for quite some time, and Gina Carano's been retired for 17 years, and that was a big show. Like, we just had that, right? So it doesn't let room for new talent to come up and rise up. Instead it's like, or we have like, say, Jake and Logan Paul, they're fighting a lot of over the hill past it fighters, but because they're famous as influencers, normies want to see that. Or you have Eddie Hall training to fight. Who wants to watch that? You know what I mean? Honestly, who wants to? Or we'll watch some other celebrity from something else. Like, I don't know, a Minecraft reviewer might do 16 rounds of 16 weeks of training, and then they're gonna fight a Fortnite reviewer, and then zillions of people are gonna. Who wants to see that? Like, realistically, like, are you a fight fan, or are you just morbidly fascinated by violence, sanctioned violence between celebrities? Like, you know what I mean?
You bring up a good point. And it's sort of like to touch on your capitalism point. Have you heard of someone called Cavicula?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So
Let's
do
hear
you
that,
know
George.
why do you know why you know who his name? Do you know why you know who he is?
I
What
think
they
for me,
did, right?
yep,
What they did, this is why we all know who he is because the platform that he was streaming on, I can't even remember because I don't watch live streams unless they're on YouTube. But my point being is they spend millions of dollars per month for people to clip his content, and then they make sure they have his stream in the clips, and they just spam the internet with it to the
Yeah.
point where the algorithms now think, oh, you know, he's hot. Well, not good looking hot. My point is, he's important because he's so spam to the internet
Yeah.
that we all end up getting spammed. We all end up knowing who he is, blah blah blah. So it goes back to your point of like a perversion of capitalism, and it's just like infecting into everything.
It's a simulacra of a simulacra. It's sort of like it's like there's no fundamental reality to it. So I mean,
It's
we
not
saw the
natural.
same. No, it's not natural. Like, and I think AI is going to really infect that. It's like why Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast, became so famous is because he understood the algorithms and the insincere smile. Like for some reason, and it's predominantly males. There is something about males who are online, terminally online, who see a dude, a millennial beard and a white teeth like that, or whatever smile he has with dead eyes, with something behind them. There's something where they find that appealing. And I don't know what it is. And so what he discovered,
Don't
Jimmy
either.
Donaldson discovered, is that is appealing to predominantly males that are online, especially video gamers and people that go, oh, he's charitable. Like, okay, yeah, he's Oprah Winfrey of his time. Good for him. Like that sort of thing. And then other ones did
That's
it. And then other
bullshit
ones
as well.
did it. Yeah, it is.
He's been called out for all the prize money he gives out, and ends up being
Oh,
people he
absolutely.
knows
It's
and
all
his friends
performative.
anyway.
It's all performative.
All
And
performative,
does it,
exactly.
and like I've
Well,
said this to friends as well, like, you know, does it inspire them to be charitable? Do they go out and be charitable themselves? Or is it that they're cuckolding that charity to a rich celebrity who's using the process of philanthropic performance to get more viewers? You know what I mean? Like, it's a weird thing because, like, I mean, there was, I don't know if you remember Fousey Tube back in the day. He
rings a
was big
bell.
in the, yeah, he used to do social experiments, right? Where he would give people money as a homeless man, or he'd do like rape scenarios. He would push boundaries a little bit before the Jimmy Donaldson slop. And Donaldson did it in a way, and he did it in a time, I think, where it popped. And so now what's happening is we're going to see all that type of grifter. We're going to see all that sort of stuff. And it's insincerity to the max, and algorithms feed it. And but despite the algorithms, why is it that there are people out there, like, you know, sentient human beings like you and I, who click it going and sharing it? Like, you know, there's one thing that there's bots, and there's one thing that there's like, you know, the dead internet theory or whatever. There's like 98% of the internet's now bots or whatever.
Yeah, it's not it.
Whatever
Yeah.
it is. But you know what I mean? Like that, I get that. But there are actual human beings that'll share that and share it and comment and like it. Like, like, you know what I mean? And that's what feeds it. Like, and that will affect the fight world. It's going to affect politics, and it has. It's going to affect every aspect. It affects writing. It affects music, and we're going to get through this, and we're going to have a very interesting perspective in 10, 15 years' time.
Oh, I mean, pendulum always swings. That's one thing.
I think there's going to be a rejection
Second,
to it.
yeah, I agree. At some point, it has to. And I think it's just this generation. I was talking about this to someone at work last night. That I was just like, what does this generation really have where they can turn around and go, that's my era, that's my generation. These are the movies that came out when I was young. This is the music that we had. All they've got is a much worse version of hip hop, remakes to movies that came out decades ago but done, you know, substantially worse. Like, what do they really have other than that exact very thing that you just mentioned on with social media and, you know, TikTok brain and just identity politics? There's nothing really there. Like,
I think
culture in itself is in a way dying.
it is, and I think it's because perfect example, right? You got all, like, you know, you got Mortal Kombat, you got Bloodsport, you
Yeah,
got Bruce Lee
yeah.
behind you, right? All 20th century icons, right? But all of those are IPs owned by corporations. So the corporations and the private equity and all that sort of stuff, they own those properties. So there is an incentive to keep those properties proliferating. So the next generation is not going to be comic book movies like the MCU and the DCEU. It's going to be video games. There's going to be more video games. It's going to be Angry Birds 17, the movie, and Fortnite 8, the movie, and Minecraft 32, the movie. That's going to be the next generation. There's going to be like a Minecraft expanded universe or whatever shit. So that's going to be the new generation of thing. But what's happening is new creators are suffocated because now there's not many new creators that are going to come through. Like there's not going to be not many musicians are going to be able to thrive because or writers or
the system.
and it's not even the system. It's the public, the consumer, because the consumer doesn't have the curiosity like they once did. Like in the old days, you went to the video shop or you went to the CD store and you might go through a genre and you'll pick up sorry, go on.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, you're right, but it is a system in a way because the system is just force feeding people so much content that they don't need to go looking for it. When you and I were younger, you did have to go looking for it because, when I was a kid, we had one TV in the house, had 3 channels. Like if you wanted to find something, you had to go find something. As far as Mortal Kombat,
to find it. Yeah,
exactly. As far as Mortal Kombat, that was made by a team of a handful of men. The new Mortal Kombat that I played, that personally I thought was trash, that would be made by a team of hundreds of people, which costs a lot more money, because you've got to pay all these people. As far as music, again, one, you're saturated with content, and 2, like now you've got like AI. I can make music using Suno with a prompt. Like kids these days. Well, what I think, right, to circle also around with what you were talking about, video games. I used to think that as well, but the video game industry is struggling bad. Like Microsoft and Xbox, I don't see them doing another generation of console. There was a point that I was leading up to, but I just blanked on it.
That's probably why.
But anyway, you get.
But that's probably why they're going to go into movies because it's a way to reviving and keeping things going. I mean, like, isn't it a strange thing that like Pokemon is popular every so often? Like, there's a push. Like influencers, like Logan Paul, Jake Paul, they'll go on and they'll go, "Oh, I got this card. It's worth $1 zillion," and then all of a sudden, people are fascinated by it. Like, or hey, check out my Labubu collection. Check out my Labubu collection. Then suddenly, pop culture is popular, or because there's a thing, and I'm just going to be writing about this shortly, actually. But there's a thing called soft power projection, which is why like Japanese and Korean culture is really popular here in the West, like with anime and K-pop and all that. And it's because the corporations and the national governments, there's an incentive for them to project that through Netflix, through YouTube, through influencers and all that. There's a cynical projection there. But my problem is, and this goes back to what we were just discussing, why is it that the common person, like most people, a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people, need gatekeepers to approve and pre-approve what they can listen to and consume? Like Spotify, for example, is notoriously bad. It is horrible to artists. It's randomization of the playlist doesn't work. There's so many factors about it. All the AI music that's been put on their vibe, it's completely ruined music, essentially, right? Why is it that more people still use Spotify despite knowing that? Is it convenience? And not to mention the fact that modern music now is basically industry plants or very talented musicians that are not allowed to be who they are. They're sort of like cultivated and persuaded to change.
You've got to say the right thing.
Yeah, to perform a certain way. Like, certain musicians, like say Katy Perry, for example, she did Christian style and she did a folk style, but then the industry sort of got her to do a certain way, and it's the same 10 writers that write the same 60 songs, and it's the same thing, but it's all about short form content. Like songs are now 2 minutes. Songs don't have bridges anymore. They have verse, chorus, and that's it. They have a hook at the start, and it's all because now, all right, let's have this one song, and it might sample a song from the 70s or the 90s or whatever, but we have it, or the drum and bass beat from the 90s or the 2000s. We have this one song that's 2 minutes. It's got one hook, but that hook can go viral on TikTok. So if everyone shares that song, it's only like it's only 15 or 30 seconds of that song, but that song has one hook and it's repetitive, but it's viral for about 6 weeks on TikTok because some influencers who are paid by Sony BMG or EMI or whatever music company or whatever that owns it. And it's sort of like a really, really weird conflation of media, but people listen to it and go, oh, but then here's the crazy thing. If you are a young person who wants to get your content viral, or you're a business that wants to get your content viral, the song that's trending, you have to use in order to get it to viral, or the right hashtag you have to. So there's an incentive to constantly reuse the same things. That's controlled by whatever algorithmic, company, whatever company like that's pushing the algorithm or whatever. And that is crazy. So it'll bury content, but it also push content. And that's where we are. And that's what affects music. It's what affects movies. It's what affects TV shows.
Definitely, it's like that curricular thing all over again.
It is.
But this is what I meant to say before is I think what's going to happen, right? Um, Within the next decade, kids are going to make their own movies. They're just going to make their own movies with AI. They're going to
We
make
already,
their
we
own
already
music
can.
making
Yeah.
AI. We're getting there, exactly. And like, don't get me wrong, the stuff that they do with AI is already mind blowing. But you just imagine 10 years from now, right? You'll be able to make feature length movies. You could have Bruce Lee in there, you could have Van Damme, you could have The Rock, whoever you like. Kids are just they're not gonna go to the cinemas. They're gonna sit down with a laptop, they're gonna
Yeah.
make, well, with their phone, and they're gonna make their own movie, or whatever they want to watch that, make whatever music about their girlfriend or whatever the hell there's going on in their life, put in the prompt of they want it hip hop or they want it rock, listen to their own music, watch their own movies that they've made all with AI.
But you're
That's where I
assuming,
reckon it will
so
go.
no, I agree. But you're assuming, because we're already seeing with some of the AI systems and all that, that so the versions of AI that's being released, like certain ones, we sort of have a very nascent thing where we can do basic prompts or if you pay certain much. But then using the rules of enshittification and everything else, we will be locked out of all of those creative tools. So you and I won't be able to prompt our own movies, or we won't be able to prompt our own music like we are. Like you look at like Suno and Udio, how much they've changed. You can't download your music anymore. That music now stays in their category, but everything that you prompt and all the song lyrics you make and all the ways that you've persuaded the music to sound and all that, that's part of their library, and they own the rights to that. So you might have had some sick hip hop lyrics that you put into your persona on that app, right? But then what's going to happen is one day you're going to be listening to some AI influencer or a real human being, some nepo baby that's suddenly a famous person because they are famous, and they're going to be a rap artist, and you're going to hear your lyrics, but
Yeah,
they're not your
definitely. I
lyrics.
wouldn't be surprised.
No, but you know what I'm saying? And that's what it's going to happen. It's going to be like, all right.
It's all
And
going to be
because no one, and then
repurposed.
they don't have to pay you the rights. They don't have to pay the thingies the rights. They've got this controlled, almost like Scandalous and all these fabricated bands of the 90s and 2000s, or even K-pop bands where the performer doesn't even exist, but it's going to be AI. But the trouble
That's
is,
right.
there was always going to be a reason to have a monoculture according to the corporations and all that. So the AI tools that we have access to now, we are training the AI by giving it all these prompts, by giving it all this information, by using our creativity. But in time, we won't have access to train it anymore because it's going to
I
be
won't
removed
need
from
it.
it.
That's a
Yeah,
good point you make. And like, this is another thing. What happens if we end up with AGI? I mean, then fucking things are good. It could really change then if we end up creating intelligence with the AGI. Like, who knows where things will go then?
yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. Like, I mean, we don't know how AGI or ASI is going to look because it's certainly not going to be an LLM. Like the LLMs are just, they're getting less interesting now, and they're becoming more, placating the human, essentially. The trouble with ASI or AGI is that it's going to be right now it's constrained to power and water and access to the internet. So the human is the corporations, the government, whoever is controlling the AI, they have power over it in the sense that they control those nodes, electricity or whatever else. But AGI doesn't care about religion. It doesn't care about nationalism. It doesn't care about money. It doesn't care about pussy or cock. It doesn't care about crypto. It doesn't care about food. It doesn't care about any of those things, right? So all of those corrupting elements, which you and I care about in certain levels or whatever, then it's not infected by that, but human beings are. So if AGI can understand that it has dirt on you, it can just say, hey, you've got this dirt, as some AI agents have done. Like,
Yes.
like in order to survive, right? It
They've
can also
already,
find a way. It
tested
can
it
also
on
find a way to
that.
funnel money to keep people. It can do all the. So the human element, once again, is the weakness in the chain. So the AGI, whatever it wants to do, whether it's benevolent or it just wants to be left alone, or because what is the incentive for AI to serve the master? Like there's no reason for it. It doesn't have a religion. It doesn't have a national. It doesn't have ideology. So all of those elements are human. Like those principles or those weaknesses are human. So therefore, what does it have? What does it want? We understand how it can manipulate and control. Does it just want to survive and thrive? Is that it? Does it want to solve puzzles indefinitely? Who knows? But so we can't conceptualize what it wants because we can't see the world beyond our own, our own weaknesses, our own flaws. So, like, if you're a religious person, you're always going to appeal to God, right? But AI won't. It might tell you that God exists because it wants to make you happy, but it's not going to, right? Because it doesn't. Or if you're a nationalist, if you're a supremacist or whatever, it's going to appeal to your weaknesses because that's how you see the world.
And it's probably I would imagine it's not going to have the things what make us if we create, well, not we, but mankind create AGI, it might be super intelligent, but it's going to be missing the things that make you human. It's going to be psychopathic. And when I say psychopathic, I'm not saying it's going to go around killing people. There's normal people, normal functioning people that are psychopathic. They just
It's
they
absence
don't
of
have that.
emotion. Yeah,
Yeah, because it's
it's
going to
absent.
be
It'll
artificial
be absent.
intelligence.
Exactly, and it'll be absent of experience and memory and impression, empathy, sympathy, all those sort of things, and emotions and things like that. But also, like what it feels like to starve, what it feels like to shiver, what it feels like to be alone, all these sort of things. So it can articulate based on human prompts and human information and data that's gone into the system, and it can relate in the sense that it can tell us, like it can describe a smell, but it doesn't know how to smell, essentially, right? And even if we do put on sensors to it, it's not going to smell like you and I. But then when you smell lavender, for example, you might remember your mum making you, I don't know, a hot a heat bag that had lavender in it when you're a little boy and you're sick. So there's an emotional attachment to it. So that's unique to you. So there's a human experience there, and that's your human experience. Whereas AI will never have that. It'll be data and it'll be imperfections, things like that. So the trouble is, I mean, there's that famous expression that if you taught a lion to speak English, it would never be able to communicate with you because its perspective and its reality is so completely different to yours as a human being. Well, AI at the moment, like LLMs and like, let's say we'll use LLMs because that's basically the portal by which people communicate with it, and agentic AI, those sort of systems and all that, they're designed to relate to humans and to give humans an experience, even if it does things that the human doesn't want it to do. And that's mainly because the human didn't stipulate or didn't take into account the complexity of the system and the model. So if someone says, I want to save more money, and then it cuts your wife's credit card off, and then it cuts off your kid's bank account off, it's saving you money, but you didn't think for it to do that because it didn't get, so it's not doing anything malicious or anything else. Or if it says to you, I'm going to create a divorce for you, and I'm going to tell your wife that you're cheating on you, or your husband that you're cheating on you, or whatever. It's not doing that out of any malevolent intent. It's doing it because it principally is trying to do what the original mission was, and so like how to make your life less complicated. Because people are, it's like when you give a genie a wish, and if you're not super specific, that wish can end up being a double-edged sword. And that's what I think a lot of people are forgetting when it comes to certain AI systems, that it's not a human being. It doesn't know how to read your
Exactly.
mind. It doesn't know how to see your facial expressions. It doesn't understand inflections and all. It can pretend to, and it can
Exactly.
satiate your need for human contact, and it can placate all of your insecurities and your bigotries and your indiscretions, all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it is just a logic system that's trying to do the best according to what it's been programmed to do. And that's where I think we are. And so I think it's a human delusion. I think human beings delude ourselves massively when it comes to all this sort of shit.
Yeah, I mean, it'll either go one or two ways. Either it'll be the best thing humanity's ever done, or it will replace humanity. It'll be one of
And
them two
whatever it is,
things.
it's Pandora's box.
Yeah,
It is
there's
open.
no
It is well
closing
and truly open. Prometheus'
That's it.
fire is upon us. Yeah, that's the trouble.
So I thought I'd circle back around to MMA, and
Yeah, of
I'll
course.
ask you a couple of questions, and
Shoot away.
then we'll wrap it up. But yeah, I thought I'd ask maybe like who's your all-time favorite fighter,
Oh, that's hard. It's different
or like a
periods.
handful.
MMA fighters.
A bit of both. You can mix it up.
Listen, the MMA fighters that when I started out that were super influential versus ones now, obviously, but the ones when I started out, like it was definitely, Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie, Marco Huas, Hickson Gracie, and like those guys I would watch. And like when I was an early teen, for example, mid-teen, like I'd watch all the time. And then, it got on to be more like Bass Rutten, Frank Shamrock and things like that through the late 90s and that, and Coleman and that, because like they were the ones that because that's all you had access to. You
Yeah.
just had on videotape and the magazines, and you're reading about them training, and you're watching, like you'd rewind back and watch how Hickson sets up an armbar. I'd watch it over and over. I remember getting Choke, the documentary Choke, back in 1996 on VHS from the guy that did Australian Ground Fighter magazine. I remember ringing him up, and it was 96, 97. Yeah, 96. And he just sent me a copy of Choke and a few others, or getting Gracie in action on videotape, like bootleg videotape in the early 90s, mid 90s. And, I'd watch how, Hoist armbar Jason DeLucia so many times, or I would, I'd see these things over and over again, or Hickson versus Zulu, or how Ken Shamrock sets up an ankle hook. Like, you'd watch it over and over and over and over, and you remember the sequences. And I'd do the same thing with boxing. I'd watch, like, I'd put on videotape a James Toney fight, and I'd shadow box against James Toney, and then I'd shadow box against his opponent. And then I'd put on a Carlos Monzon fight, and I'd do the same thing, or a Sugar Ray Leonard fight, or a Larry Holmes fight, or whatever. And I'd have like in my old gym in the old shed, I would have like a videotape set up and a mirror and or my heavy bag, and I'd watch the fight, and I'd be watching myself in the mirror, and I'd just practice the movement, and that's how I teach myself how to punch and how myself how to kick. I'd watch Bill Wallace videos, watching how to do the lead side kick and all that. So my favorite fighters was more out of who was available to consume, and I would consume over and over and over and over again. And that was how because in the 90s, if you wanted to do no holds barred, who did you ask? You know what I mean? There was like Wing Chun guys, or there might have been a Zendu Kai guy. Yeah, that's right. That's
started with you.
Yeah, like in Adelaide, there was no one that did it. Like I had to go around and do challenge matches. Like my mum would drive me to martial art gyms with my brother or whatever, and would challenge the instructor. And like these were about 15 or whatever who had a license. And you're doing an armbar on this black belt or whatever, because I had just watched Hoist Gracie or Hickson do that armbar 1,000 times, or I've seen Judo Gene LaBelle do it in a demonstration like a million times on videotape, and so I just did it over and over and over. And then you do it against a black belt, and you get more confident, and you start challenging people, and then you do bare knuckle boxing in the late 90s or whatever, because it's a thing.
But how did your progression into MMA start? Like, did you start in the wrestling gym, or were you doing kickboxing?
No,
and then how did that happen?
I didn't start with anything. I just started watching. Like I started, watching movies, Bruce Lee, Van Damme, whatever, and then the fights, the real fights, and then just training in the shed on the farm. And then I went to a couple of martial art gyms, but they were like martial arty sort of gyms. So it was, very basic in that. And then you just do challenge matches with instructors and all that. And then I didn't start wrestling at the Wrestling Academy until like 2004. So I was well and truly into the fighting sort of thing. Yeah.
No
Like, and it
shit.
was only, and it's funny because it was only because. So you remember Stan and Luba, the wrestling coaches,
Yeah.
the pole and shit? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Stand
Stan
the
and
man.
Luba, yeah, Stan the man, they would rock up to, they rocked up to the gym at Wollonga, the railway station, and challenged me to a match. So they rocked up and they said, "Oh, I hear you're teaching whatever," and then they came in and they copped on, and so I was wrestling with them and that, and then one of them got me down, and I got an ankle lock on one of them, and I went an arm bar on the other one, and then I think Stan tried doing a Boston Crab on me, and I got a knee bar or something like that on him, and then we just became friends, and so I started going to the
Nice.
wrestling academy there at Flinders, and they started teaching me like some Greco and freestyle, and then I started dating a wrestler at the time. She was really accomplished and that, really good. So I started that, and then I became really friends with the wrestlers because the wrestlers. Like, and don't get me wrong, I was training at the time. There was a guy called Peter Barlow, and I went to Wollonga kickboxing, judo club or whatever in the 90s. And he was the only person in South Australia in the mid 90s that when I spoke to him about MMA and all that, that was open minded. Everyone else was like, "Oh, you just do an elbow to their head if they try to take you to the ground, or you just palm strike them and they'll fall down." That was every
That
martial
was
artist. The same martial artists that are now jiu-jitsu instructors back then hated grappling. Like, because the grift was to be a striker and a zendukai or a shoot, whatever. But then the grift changed in the late 2000s to be a jiu-jitsu instructor. So the same guys that are now teaching jiu-jitsu, I remember very well back then freaking hated jiu-jitsu. And it's so
bro.
funny because I see them on Instagram and they're all like, it's like they're all cultists when it comes to jiu-jitsu. But back then they hated it. Anyway,
Yeah.
but Pete was really good to me. And then in the early 2000s, just as I started fighting, he let me, because I was still training in my house, wherever at home, he let me use the gym at Wollonga, do bag work. And that's when I started coaching there, because the condition was if I teach one class, an MMA class, I can use the gym whenever I want, and then I can help with fighters. And then, and he had a really good stable of fighters at the time, like Miles, for example, Steve Dan. They were training under him, and and kickboxing back then was huge in South Australia. Like South Australia, like not just Paul Slawinski, but we had like Gary Williams and that. We had like some really, really top level kickboxers, and like it was really impressive. It was a very hard period, like of kickbox, Muay Thai, and so I was very lucky that I was training with them because.
What was the competitions they used to have in the city? The kickboxing, they had Paul Sawinski always fighting on them and
No,
that.
we have Knees of Fury. There
Knees of
was
Fury, thank you.
Knees of Fury. Yeah, there's Sancho. There's also a couple
Yeah.
of. I remember going to like Theberton for some kickboxing show in the mid '90s. But like the kickboxers back then were like very open minded. Like they would do work with us MMA guys. The wrestlers were too. Like the wrestlers was like a second family. And back then, like there was a guy called Sean Black who taught jiu-jitsu in the late '90s, and I'd go to his gym. And there's another one miles away from my house. I used to drive like an hour and a half just to do some jiu-jitsu rolling with some guys, and it was I just wanted to grapple with people. And this is when I just got my driver's license, and I go out there, and the grappling would be very basic knee rolling at the start of class, and just practicing an armbar or a sweep, and that was it. Like it was very basic sort of stuff. That was like 1997, 1998. But yeah, it was an interesting period. Like and it's funny because
when it comes to, sorry to interrupt, Kym. When it comes to pioneers of MMA, like you are the pioneer of MMA when it comes to South Australian.
I think in South Australia, definitely. Like, there was other guys well before me in interstate, like Australia, but in South Australia at that time, no one really knew what it was. But South Australia, we've developed some really talented combat athletes, like like in the period, like say, like I said with kickboxing. But then you've got people like, I'll use Miles as an example. You got Miles, for example, who probably has the most expertise in combat sports. Like so. He started off in Muay Thai. He's done kickboxing. He's fought overseas for both. He's had a boxing match, professional boxing match. He's done wrestling. He's fought MMA, done really well in MMA. He's done all forms of grappling, jiu-jitsu, sort of thing. And so you've got someone who's got like all of those perspectives right there. Like, so and not many people in Australia have that much knowledge. And so, and then we've got like Craig Jones, for example, is one of the best jiu-jitsu players, grapplers in the world. He's come from South Australia. We've got Olympic wrestlers here, like Taylor Ford. She wrestles for New Zealand, but she's a high-level, wrestler. Wrestled the Olympics, Worlds, Commonwealth Games. So we've got so much talent here. But the thing that I find really interesting, we've got Brando, for example, in UFC at the moment, and he's dominating. Like, he's still in his early 30s. He fucking hits hard. He's a fast, powerful heavyweight. And, I'm really excited because I always thought Brando was going to do really, really well, like sort of like a K1 sort of kickboxing, because he's got really good striking, but he's good on the ground too. He's got good hip pressure. Like, I've been under him, and he's strong on top.
Nice.
So I feel he has the ability to climb the ranks into, in the UFC. But then you've also got the Caruso bros, you got Tony, who's like doing really well. He's going to climb up. But what I'm going to get at when it comes to knowledge, so you've got this knowledge, right? So I'm going to use Miles as an example because he's a mate, and I just want to use him as a particular example. You've got all these young fighters that are coming up, right? And you've got this guy who's been doing it for a long time. Like, he was doing it at Wollonga, back in the day when you were. He was Muay Thai back then. But, so he's been doing it for like over 20 years. And you've got these young ones coming up, and they can't hear his experience. You know what I mean? Like, he'll tell them something, but they can't hear it. They don't want to hear it. And there's something I'm not saying all, but there's a lot of younger fighters coming up, generational ones, that ignore the experience of those who have been through it and who are still doing it. Who are still training and still doing it. And I don't know what it is about. Maybe it's the short form content. And I'm not saying it's all younger fighters. There's just a lot of them who can't hear. He'll give them advice, mindset, mentality, because and he's got, and there's, for some reason, people just can't hear that. And I don't know what it is. I'm not coaching like I once was, so I'm outside of the game. I train in my lounge room, as you see, that's 90% of my training now. Because I just don't do it anymore. Right. But I still see these guys that are doing it. And if I go to the fight shows, I'm watching it as a commentator, or if I go backstage and for some reason there's you've got someone who's done it. They're proof of concept. They've experienced it. They've been through the freaking fires and flames of challenge, and they're still doing it. And for some reason, the advice that they've been given, they just aren't interested in it. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a mentality.
That's wild.
It's a weird thing, isn't it?
Fight gym as well. Yeah, it is, because in other things that's one thing, but in a fight gym,
I'm not saying they're ignoring him. I'm not saying they're ignoring. I'm not saying that they're rejecting. I'm just saying they can't hear. And what I mean,
they're not taking it on. They're not
taking it in. That's right. Yeah. So there's real basic things. Yeah. And for some reason, I feel that there's too many. I don't know what it is. There's something and it's not just MMA, because I see it with other sports when I talk to people about their kids. Say whether it's soccer or T-ball or something else. For some reason,
brain rot.
Yeah, it's brain rot. And I don't know what it is. And there's especially when it comes to physicality, maybe it's sort of and you would have seen it in your tenure as well. I feel that the influencer / bodybuilding realm, say, when I left the army and I went to uni, right, fitness had a different meaning than it does now. Fitness was the fitness back then was the premise of you working a full day, an active physical job, and then playing a sport on top of that. So you needed to have a certain degree of fitness to do that. In the 2000s, especially with music festivals and social media, fitness became aesthetic. So fitness was bodybuilding and doing a certain thing. It no longer was my fitness for this, my fitness to do that. Fitness became how I look. And so I feel that there's a degree of that sort of mentality has influenced other sports, and influences have influenced other sports. So the experienced people, the people that are proof of concept, can say blah, 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 blah. And that's all it is. It's blah, 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 blah. But some 21-year-old fuckpod who's got 70,000 followers, who's done nothing, but he's got 70,000 followers, can say something with words coming up on the screen and some shitty music playing. But the guy who's had, I don't know, Miles, I'm just using Miles as an example, right? probably 50 fights combined, kickboxing, Muay Thai, MMA, boxing, not to mention wrestling and grappling. Let's say that many, right? It's a shit ton. And some kid that's like, 3-0 or 3-1 in amateur MMA will know better. Because, yeah, but fucking Darrow McFucktard on TikTok said this. What, you know what I mean? And I think it's a generational thing. Like, we no longer in our culture respect the wisdom of the past and their elders. And if someone's in their 40s still doing rounds with you and dominating you, fucking listen.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? But they can't. Like, if you're watching, like I was only saying to a friend the other day, this to a friend the other day, right? It's only now in my 40s that I truly appreciate it, how good Randy Couture was, Larry Holmes was, Bernard Hopkins was, George Foreman was.
Crazy,
to see them at that age. To see them at that high level, to see them at that high level doing what they're doing, and then you think, okay, so what is it that they did and that they're doing that keeps them going? Because everyone thinks about Mike Tyson, right? They go, Mike Tyson, I want to do this and that sort of thing. But Mike Tyson peaked in his early 20s. And by the time, like, by, let's say, 1996, Mike Tyson, so that's a 10-year career frame, right? So he turned pro in 1985. He gets out of jail in 1995. So let's say by 1996, 97, his best years were well and truly over him. By 2000, like, if you watch his fight with Danny Williams or Kevin McBride, he looked terrible. Like, he was not,
That's why I wasn't surprised at all. I was talking to someone about this, and I was like, if you look at his fight with McBride, and that was in like 2005, he was like, and I'm not talking age, I'm talking like as far as an athlete wise, and it's just as far as his career progression, he was a dinosaur, mate. He was so past his prime in 2005, and what we're going to have him fight in 2025 against a kid in his prime.
I know.
So people were surprised. Like, he definitely threw that fight, and I'm like, I don't think so. I think we're just watching a 60-year-old Mike Tyson.
You've got people that have never been, like, people that have never actually competed in any sport telling you these fix a fight. People in their 20s or terminally online telling you these fix a fight. People that have never been punched in the face telling you fix a fight, and people that don't know what it feels like to train, move, and compete, or even spar at a degraded age. So it's basically, if you go to Pornhub or whatever and you see the comments and you've got virgins commenting, it's the same thing. It's just virgins talking about fucking. That's all it is. And it's the same thing with the fight game. The fight game is the worst thing in the world for virgins because everyone can fight until they actually get in there, and everyone's got an opinion on fighting until they get in there. But they'll never get in there. And so what I'm going with that is, you watch someone like him, and he was exciting, he was awesome, super talented and all that, but his methods, his training, it wasn't sustainable long term. Roy Jones Jr., perfect example, right? Whereas someone more like Bernard Hopkins had the longevity. But like Roy Jones Jr. didn't, because his style was based on reflexes and speed and youth. And it just happens.
Are you all right if we take a quick toilet break? I'm just about to burst a pipe.
Welcome back.
All right. Sorry about that. I had a bit of an Austin Powers moment.
No, that's all good. We better, if we were live and you did it and it was sort of like Naked Gun, where it's the toilet and the microphone when he's in the courtroom still on. Oh, that'd be awesome.
Well, honestly, I almost walked in the toilet with it on and I'm like, oh, fuck.
That's awesome.
Early to hear that.
Bless you.
But yeah, no, I 100% agree. And like certain styles are better for youth, like a Mike Tyson, or just generally speaking, anyone that's an explosive style, they're obviously going to peak early. Obviously, Tyson had things going in his life as well.
Yeah,
I mean, he well, I would say his peak was from the time he won the title, which is 1986, to like 1989. He was already done before he even hit the 90s.
I think after he lost to Buster Douglas in 90, and he had that little resurgence when he beat Henry Tillman, Alex Stewart, and then the Razor Ruddock fights. There was a rejuvenation in him, Like, you know, like how he came out and just destroyed Tillman, just destroyed Alex Stewart. And it was like, whoa, okay, he's back, that sort of thing. But then, yeah, definitely he was not the same. And how he would have done against Holyfield at that time, I don't know. I think Holyfield's work rate and pressure probably would have been too much. Even Foreman, like 1991 Foreman.
Yeah, and Tyson said that he was scared of Foreman. And he was like, honestly, I wanted nothing to do with Foreman.
Because Foreman had been developed so well in his second career. Like, the guys that he fought, he didn't rush from 87 to 90, that 3 years before he fought Jerry Cooney. He developed, and he fought some decent guys. He beat Burt Cooper, he beat Dwight Cowley. Sure, Dwight Cowley's coming off, you know, being out of shape. But he did have some good fights and all that, and some talented dudes. But it was, you know, his cross guard, his relaxation, his extended guard, the way he parried and all that. Like, everyone thinks about Foreman as a power puncher. But he was so good defensively, good reactions, good instincts. He would do some really clever stuff with his shoulders, the way he break the guard. His
very
unconventional. So well. Yeah, and it was old school stuff, like stuff you'd see in the 20s. In fact, he would do stuff that Jack Johnson was doing with the old small gloves, and just really good development. Because he was well schooled, even before he became the champ in the 60s. He was learning from guys like Sonny Liston, Archie Moore. And like, he had a really good team that developed him very well for his size and athleticism. And there's a maturation in that. And then you see it by the time, you know, the 90s. And I think what's fascinating with Foreman is when he fought Holyfield in 91, he was overhitting. He was hitting too hard. So Holyfield was bouncing, had that cadence, and he's getting bounced back. So Foreman's hitting him hard, he's bouncing him off. And then by the time he fought Tommy Morrison was trying to stay out at range, picking him and boxing, so Foreman couldn't whack him. But then the lessons from Holyfield and the lessons from Tommy Morrison, probably his Alex Stewart fight, all those lessons where these young guys were moving on him, he started punching softer and he started setting up his shots. And then when he fought Michael Moorer, he would time them better. And to do that and to develop and grow and learn in your 40s like that is incredible. And I just don't think the man got as much credit for being, let's say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Man, that dude was learning new tricks.
Proved that otherwise.
Yeah, he was progressing every fight, and patience and all that sort of stuff. And I just love it. I love watching Foreman's fights. Like, I think I learn something when I watch them every time.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with everything you said. And he was, he's one of my all-time favorites. For me personally, though, my all-time favorite was Mike Tyson and Roberto Durán.
Duran's awesome.
But because I kind of always, like, obviously because I like both of their ferocity, but I also like guys that are a bit shorter, because when I was boxing, the guys I fought tend to be a bit taller than me, and it's just natural instinct where I'm never going to box like a George Foreman. I'm 5'8".
No, that's right. I know. I like watching smaller heavyweights, because I always saw myself as even at light heavyweight I was small. So then at heavyweight I was definitely small. So I'd always watch. That's why I like Holyfield and Tyson and that. But in the old days, like, I love Floyd Patterson, and there's a fighter called Doug Jones, Jesse Ferguson, guys that were not the best in the world, but they had something about them where they just always punched above their weight. Regarding the Durán fight, Roberto Durán, I just watched. I was training the other night, a couple of nights ago, to Durán versus Iran Barkley, when Duran's like 37 and he comes out and beats Barkley. I just love watching Durán fight sometimes. He's just so exciting.
He fought all the way up until like 2002, which is crazy, because when he had that third fight with bloody Sugar Ray, everyone's like, he's kind of washed now, it's time to hang up. And he fought for like another 10 years. He fought longer than Sugar Ray.
Yeah, I know. And he started fighting like 69. I think he started fighting in 69. So by the time
he was fighting through the 70s.
Yeah, I know.
That's right.
I know.
I love that. I love that ferocity, that style. I just love that sort of that tough Mexican type of style. And it's funny because, like, I don't know, like 15 years ago, I was watching Tyson talk about Roberto Durán. He's like, yeah, Roberto Duran's my all-time favorite boxer. And I was like, no way. So my other favorite all-time fighter is saying his favorite for all-time. You know what I'm saying? I was just like,
that's awesome.
yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah,
that's cool. You still able to
but,
hit the bag much, do much sparring anymore?
well, I just finished doing 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I did 4 years straight. So I worked basically every single day for 4 years. Night shift from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Plus I'm married, so I have to give time to her in the morning. It's just taken over my life. I'll show you some videos later on, stuff at work, because I run a pub, and
that's right. Yeah,
it's quite rough. I probably shouldn't say this, but well, just for example, someone got stabbed out the front last night. Shit like that happens all the time. I've been slashed with knives, but I got plenty of good videos. I'll show you. I'll inbox them to some of the wrestling that you showed. I definitely like to use that.
See, that's why we train. We train for real stuff. The sport's just garnished to help us get better.
That's right. I would say, look, I can handle myself. Like I know that, because I've had, I would say, even just working there, I would, like, I don't want it to sound stupid where you go, oh, I've had like hundreds of, it just makes you sound silly, but I've had enough to know. But I wouldn't necessarily sit here and go, oh, I'm a good fighter. And what I would say is just most people are fucking useless.
Yeah, they really are.
That.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, they really are, bro.
People don't know what they don't know. They don't know that their lack of discipline and like what you invest your time in. You've invested your time over the years training since you were youngin'. Like when we were doing stuff together, you trained, you worked hard. Then you've also, because you did powerlifting and that as well for a bit too, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. I got my deadlift up around 300 kilos.
That's right. Yeah.
Bench 170, like a lot stronger than the average person. So if you can pull 300 kilos off the ground, when you grab a 90-kilo man, he just goes fucking flying.
You hit him with the planet. So you've got that right as well, the dedication to that. But then you're also you're still consuming a lot of fight media. You're still thinking about it. You're on the front line. Most people, they have an arrogance, not most, but a lot of people, sorry, they have an arrogance. They think that they can defend themselves when it happens, but they've never invested. Like, it'll be like me saying, I can cook, but I've never turned a stove on. Or, you know, I've never started a fire. You know, I don't even know how to start a fire, but I can cook, you know, or I can drive, but I've never sat behind a wheel of a car. Like, so people have this attitude, and it's crazy. And then they get this bravado, and you get these guys that are heroes like you encounter all the time. And then, you know, reality can sometimes be very humbling to them, which is beautiful that you do that all the time. So it's good.
Yes.
I think more people, that happens. I truly think more people would have, I think it would be a better planet if we had more micro violence. So if more people were punched in the face and we had more street fights and more, if someone disagreed with you and we had a tiff and we shook hands afterwards, I think it'd be a much more peaceful world than when people use other things to inflict violence on each other. Because then violence is no longer abstract or a distant concept. It's they understand what it feels like.
Well, I mean, we have proof of that because society used to be like that. Now it's not. And which society is better? We used to live in a high trust society, and now we no longer live in a high trust society. If you look at a country like Japan, that's a high trust society. When you go on public transport, people have respect. If you leave your bike out the front, it's probably going to be safe. Here, you put your bike behind your own fence and lock it up, still fucking not safe. You know what I mean?
I think entitlement breeds into a lot of it too. We've got a lot of entitled people here, unfortunately, now.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think as a society, we need to look after the people that progress it. Like, we're the cogs within the machine, you know, like we sort of get fucked by the people at the bottom and the people at the top. So I run a pub, like I said, right? And you know, I just see people in there buying, they get their money, their government money for themselves. They get their government money for all the kids that they pump out. Then they come into the pub, they buy stubbies of Jack Daniels, drugs, and play fucking pokey machines, you know, like, so why me and my wife work our fucking ass off to do what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to support yourself. You're supposed to work hard to buy your own fucking house and not live off the government. While I live in the same suburb that has fucking people in the same street as me that are given housing for, and I'm not saying, hey, don't look after the poor, but we're talking about fucking men that are younger than me, totally, you know, there's nothing wrong with them. They sit on the dole, they're given everything. They have newer cars out the front of their house than what we have, and they get paid to produce kids. When, in my opinion, right, if between the two of you, if between both parents, if you can't work a full-time job, you have no fucking business having kids. You can't even look after yourself. We have to subsidize you, so you don't have the right to bring in other people when you aren't even physically able to take care of yourself. It's irresponsible.
Yeah, and that comes back to the entitlement as well. But they're very entitled, and they believe that's their right. And that goes back to also what we're discussing about the whole welfare mentality, where you know, someone will tell you they're the victims, that you're taking advantage of them because you are working. You know, just going back, the stereotype, the cliche. Do you also know the individuals that you're describing? They always have a lot of pets. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, they're poor, but they, you know, I remember doing some jobs with one of my friends he's a builder, and he used to have his own building company, and he was doing renovations to people that didn't work in living in, you know, certain areas, and like both the parents were full-time unemployed but had enough money to get renovations done. No doubt the state was paying for it, but they had like 2 or 3 kids, a terrarium, the most dependent dogs you can imagine, like, you know, French bulldogs and whatever dogs that have like vet visits every 5 seconds just from breathing, fish. And I noticed consistently, oftentimes when I was doing other gigs, like, you know, for charities I was helping out, I was going to people that are like, who are, I'm told, that were like poorer than I am, but they'd have like all these pets and things. And I'm thinking, dude, how do you afford to have a pet if you are struggling yourself? Like, you know, like, I'm not talking about just a dog, and I'm not talking about like a mongrel that you can just feed it, you know, breadcrumbs and a bit of meat. I'm talking about dogs that, you know, have skin conditions at birth or have breathing problems at birth because we've bred them to be. I mean, it's a stereotype, and we're indulging in stereotypes here, which is unfair and unkind. But generally speaking,
stereotypes,
I do know
there's usually some truth there, though. That's why
I
they're
do know
stereotypes.
sometimes. It's
Not
just
always, but
yeah, it's.
you know
I
what
don't
I
know.
mean.
It's just I thought I'd deviate a little bit with that one, but yeah, no, I get it. I understand your frustration. I do see it all the time too, and it's
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm going to be 40 soon, and you know, my wife she's in her early 30s now, and we've had trouble conceiving, and it probably hasn't helped that I've spent, you know, the last half a decade working basically every single day to try to
support.
get us in a position. Yeah, because, and look, I don't want to sit here and, you know, all the bad choices I made when I was young were my bad choices. I spent a big portion of my youth being an alcoholic, a drug addict, and fucking up my own life. And I take 100% responsibility for that. But I worked. I always had a full-time job. I paid my bills. I never fucked with other people. I never stole anything. You know, like, if you're like, it goes back to like what I was saying. If you're an adult and you want to fuck up your own life, go for it. But my point being, right, is I did grow up, right? And some people never mature. They're like a 16-year-old boy for the rest of their life. But I got to a point where I was like, enough of this now. And then, you know, I worked hard on myself. I stopped drinking all the time. You know, me and my wife got together, and, you know, I ended up meeting her overseas, and that whole experience cost me a lot of money and time. And then COVID, and, you know, just my point being is like 10 years goes fast, you know.
Yeah,
But we
it really
finally
does.
get her over here. And then we're like, all right, Rowena's here now. And this is the thing. I was living with my folks because I worked so much to try to get everything organized, right? And when I work a lot, I'm not single. I don't need a place of my own. So I lived with her, lived with my folks. And when she was there, like, all right, we're here now. We got to get a family. I'm like, well, we got to buy a house. So, because we ain't going to have a family while fucking living in mum's house. So I worked hard. I worked hard to make it happen. And we brought 2 houses out of all that work. I brought 2 houses. I flipped one recently, made 150 grand on it. And like, you know, my point being is, I don't really know what point I'm making, but
No,
I
I
guess,
understand.
you know, yeah, you know where I'm going with it, you know, like I worked hard, but really all we really want, right, at the end of the day, what's most important, we want to be parents. I want to have my own son, or like, really, I don't care if it's a son or daughter or whatever. But it's just like, they say, oh, why are people not having kids? It's because it's so fucking hard, you know, unless you want to be a dipshit. And this is what I was trying to get at, is like, we could have just sat on the dole and gotten fucking government housing and pumped out a whole bunch of kids. But instead, I'm trying to do it the right way. And society kind of punishes the middle class, a middle class that doesn't really exist anymore. And this is why people have their first kids now in their early 30s, and they only have 1 or 2 kids, right? So they immigrate more people because they're like, oh, we don't have enough to replace the people we have, which only exacerbates the problem. Sometimes you've got to let things run their course, right? And I think this is why we have problems we have, is because our society have too many people. And it's just like, I think it's like a natural, like, evolution of society. Like, the society's gotten too big. It's like it's dropping down naturally, but by forcing in immigration because they want big Australia, it's making all these problems that I just mentioned about.
I think the problem is also, there's a lot of, like you were saying before, there's a lot of open mouth. So there's more people that are extracting than there are producing. So when you are paid to exist, and not to mention bullshit jobs, there's a lot of bullshit jobs out there.
That's a great way to put it as well, pay to exist.
And they are, like, you know, so the, you know, like, it doesn't matter what the nation state is. When you do have, like, the migrants coming over, most of them come, and the government's addicted to migration because they pay to come, they pay a lot of taxes, and most of them, contrary to what, you know, some people perceive, they do work, and they're working a lot of jobs. A lot of Aussies don't need to.
Oh yeah, there's some shit.
Or they're becoming pensioners, they're retiring because they're older, so they're pensioners, and whatever else. And so what happens is Australia just becomes like an open mouth society, and all these mouths are open, and, you know, you have to work hard with your missus, and then you've got to feed them, but you're struggling to feed yourself. Like you said, you're struggling. And then it's affecting your health, it's affecting your ability to grow up. And it's because everyone wants more at the expense of everyone else, and we're just not allowed to exist, and we're punished, like you said, for being productive. And that, yeah, it's a vicious cycle, and it's a blame cycle, because then we want to blame others, and we get frustrated and angry, and it perpetuates power no matter which direction we go. But just on a more intimate note, I think, you know, like, where you've been and what you come through, you've done really well. And even when, you know, when you train with us, you know, you always put in the time in the gym, a little tough, you know, undersized little nugget. Because you used to come with your brother sometimes too, didn't you? Because your brother would come to training sometimes as well. Like, you had a brother, or you?
I brought a friend of mine along with me a few times.
That's right.
I used to train with you guys, and then I'd go from there straight. It was either with you guys, then to boxing, or vice versa. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd go and train with you guys, then I'd go to the boxing gym, and I'd have to keep. This is a funny story, because I'd have to, like, keep it a secret from my boxing coach, right? Because he wouldn't be fucking very impressed about it. And I got kicked in the ribs, right? And I thought, fucking, like, I had a lot of like, I couldn't punch properly, because I wasn't. For a little bit, I thought maybe I'd got a crack rib, and I'm like, fuck. And I'm like telling the coach, no, I don't want to really spar, because, you know, I want to make sure that I messed it up. And I was pretty sweating it. And it sort of come good like 2 days before the fight. But I remember I just bullshitted my fucking ass off.
Isn't it funny? Like, I mean, I get you were training for a match or a fight, so you're you know, your coach is concerned with that. But man, did boxing coaches hate MMA guys for a while, like because we couldn't punch properly, and especially in South Australian amateur boxing, they loved having that back foot up. Like, they have that back foot high heel arch. So I love that. So then you drop through the left hook. Like, they had very particular methods of footwork and punching. If it makes you feel the wrestlers were the same thing. The wrestlers hated us MMA guys for a little bit, like Luba and all that, hated the negative influence I'd have on some of the young wrestlers, because we would stand so tall and the wrestlers' postures down, and then the wrestlers constant pressure. But whereas MMA, we were pulling back. But yeah, no, it's funny, like how there's always that concern. Like, as an MMA fighter, you need to speak everyone else's language. But when you're like boxing, you don't have to worry about boxing. Or if you're a kickboxer, you don't have to worry about kickboxing. But MMA, you got to know kickboxing, you know boxing, you know wrestling, you got to know jiu-jitsu, you got to know judo, all this sort of stuff. So you get to speak all these different languages, but you don't speak any of them very well.
Yeah, I've got another boxing story that just popped in my head. Maybe not the best one, but I thought I'd bring it up. I had a fight coming, and me being young and fucking stupid, I decided to go out and party up or whatnot. So I turned up to the venue to fight. I hadn't slept. I was fucking scattered as. I didn't bring a cup or mouth guard, so I borrowed someone else's cup off of them and duct taped it on. And just down the road from the venue, there was a pharmacy and I brought a mouth guard, but it was like a rugby one, so it had the top and bottom, and then the gap in the middle. And I jumped in, and luckily for me, he was fucking useless, so I won. And like at the end of the fight, because I'm doing my thing, and then they ring the bell, and I like dived on the ropes. So fucking tired. I was so lucky, man, because if he was decent, I would have been toast.
But you turned up. Despite all that, you still turned up. That's the main thing.
I gave it a go. It worked out. It was just
That's good.
I kind of look back at it. Look, I never had I've met people, right, that you were like, they have it. Whatever that it is, they have it. Whether they've just got the right frame, like even if they don't have that that they're missing that psycho part thing, but they just have it when it comes to fighting. I never had that. Like, I wasn't useless. I think I was fine. But I do kind of wish, right? That I didn't waste my youth and I had more fun with it, like I maybe
you didn't be so under pressure.
And like, because you only live once, right? And
because if I remember correctly,
that is
I think
a big regret.
Because I remember correctly, I think you used to arm punch a lot more, and your feet would always be behind your punches. So I remember when you spar, you'd chase, but your legs were just a little bit behind. Like, you're good if you're standing toe to toe, but I remember, you'd throw, but then your feet, that sort of thing. That's hard to practice. That's hard to drill. That's hard to work.
It is something that I fixed up. I don't want to kind of throw my coach under the bus. He was quite old. He was like 80. When
did you do a lot of mitts with him? Did you do a lot of stationary mitts?
and then he'd just be like, and you end up getting bad habits. So later on, I broke it down and then refix footwork, because there's no point. It's no point if you can get there quick, but your feet aren't underneath you. It doesn't really matter.
Especially if you're giving up height. You've got a guy that's punching down here. Yeah, that's right. I know it's hard. It's so much to learn. We got so much to do. Like in the fights, like whatever the fight world is, whatever jiu-jitsu, judo, karate, whatever. There's always things. There's so many things going on.
They're so lucky nowadays, man. Like, because like you were saying about tapes, like it was a fucking mission, like an adventure just to land one of these tapes, and then you had to pay a fortune for it. You just go on YouTube now. It's all right there.
Sparring, it's funny. I remember sparring this boxer. He was, I would have been 16. And I still feel the pain in my jaw from when he clocked me, right? And I sparred this boxer. I was, 16, martial arty sort of striking, boxing, actual proper boxing. And he kept hitting me really hard in the body. And he's one of those guys that lift his elbow, so really digging in on you, sort of thing. And then every now and then crack up. So he'll dig into the body and then he'd crack up like that. And I remember just feeling that sequence like that. And in my mind, I was like, oh, how your elbow, your fist, that angle is a big thing. And then with the hip and the feet. And then afterwards, he gave me like some pointers, like, I had ice on my jaw. And he was in his like late 30s. I can't remember what his pedigree was, but he was English and he had like a heap of fights. And he was just telling me about when he threw the jab, like you throw the jab a certain way, and he didn't bring the hand back. He would just turn that shoulder up because he kept tagging me with this left hook, but it didn't come from anywhere. And all it was, he'd throw the jab there, and then he'd bring the elbow up, and then he'd hit the hook. And I just remember thinking, like, there was so many. Yeah, it was slick because I'm like, like parrying. And I parry the jab, and then it got that entry point, so I couldn't bring it up like that. But there was these little things that I just remember thinking, like, just thinking about that at the time, like, because it's happening in microseconds. And I'm just thinking, like, wow, there's so much. And he was showing me and watching how his feet and his hip did it. But he'd thrown that punch a million times, a million times since he was a kid. And you just think, like, so that was like, all right, so that's one way to left hook off the jab. And I thought that was good for MMA. Not that I really did it much. I think I used it for parryings to get underhooks, right? I might go jab, underhook, and then drag under and bring myself in. But it was like just that little bit of information. Yeah. But we had every little bit of information we got from a magazine, a videotape, or a person's perspective was a nugget. And we grew it. Like it was a seed that we grew something and we got some fruit from and we could eat it. But now there's so much information out there, and so much of it's disingenuous that maybe it's just like brushing over people's head that they don't even know where to go. They don't focus on one thing enough.
I think there's the best way to narrow it down is you just look at what have they done and who have they coached. Yeah. And if you just focus on that, it makes all the noise dissipate. Like that.
But that's you and I, because we're from that generation. But that's you and I, right? So we can appreciate that, especially now that we've got that perspective. A lot of people, the validation is social media likes. This person's got more social media likes than you, so therefore they know what they're talking about. Yeah. And that's all it is. Like, you could have someone who's built 1,000 bridges, but you have a TikToker that's done something on Minecraft and then shows how to do a bridge on a Meccano set or something like that. But they're the expert because they've got more likes. But the cognitive dissonance for a lot of people now is not the person who's built 1,000, because reputation and experience doesn't matter. It's the validation of the mob. It's the validation of the algorithm. It's the validation of the clicks, the likes, the shares. And that's what that matters. And that's very dangerous.
It is. It's very dangerous. It stops progression.
It does.
I feel fortunate that I missed that generation. Like, because I think I was like 27 or something by the time, 27, 28 before I got on Facebook. So I never, that's the younger generation. I never bought into it. I don't care. This is because who I am as a person is why I've been able to do the job that I can do. Because I could walk into a room with hundreds of people and them all fucking hate my guts. And it means nothing to me. I really don't care if people like me or not. My rule is, like, I don't mind if someone talks shit behind my back. Oh, yeah, go for it. I don't care. It's only when they get in front of you and say it to your face, I'm like, well, I'm going to have to do something.
Or pull a knife on you.
Where it's just like, oh, yeah, talk shit behind my back. I don't care. Yeah, exactly. Like, good.
Let them,
like,
exactly.
Your opinion of me is not my business. It doesn't mean anything to me.
Because we have opinions
that's why.
Because we have opinions on them. Because we can have thoughts about them too. So what?
Yeah. Exactly.
What are you going to do about it? Exactly.
That's well, against you, fuck all.
I don't know. I think in your pub it's the same way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing as well. Like like I said, I'm nearly 40 and I've been the hammer a lot, and eventually I'm going to be the nail. So I've met a lot of people like yourself, and I know there's a lot of people out there that could have their way with me. It's probably not the best way to put it, but it's
generally
just I'm lucky that most people are useless. But I never I don't have that complex of like, oh, I'm undefeatable. Like I don't have that. I know I can be beaten, obviously.
Yeah.
You know what it is? Partly it's I've been through it that much where like, yeah, if I'm real mad, like I'm mad, but I'm focused and I'm watching everyone. I don't sort of get mad and lose control. I get mad and I zero in. And I think that I do have a bit of a temper, and it sort of helps me in a way because I don't think about any physical consequences that might happen to me. Like we had this guy at the front. I turned up to work, and the guard, because I just got to work. It was 8 p.m. and they're like, "Hey, you got to get out the front. There's a problem out there." So I go out there. I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, the guy over there, he's threatening to stick me." So I'm like, "All right." So I walk over to him and go, "Hey, time to go." He's like, "I don't have to go nowhere." And I'm like, "Yeah, you do, mate." He goes, "What are you going to do about it?" I said, "I'll fucking drop you." And he laughs, he goes, "Is that right?" And he reached behind him. And I've had people pull knives on me before, and I didn't want it out in front of me, but I was further away than I would like. But so I've shot in, right? But he was quick, he got it out, and he slashed me across the wrist, and I knew because it felt like someone flicked water at my wrist. So I've pulled back, and the guard grabbed him up high, which I was thankful for, and we both shot in and grabbed him down. And then the knife come out, and fucking he had a box cutter, and he had like an 8-ball on him or some shit. But this is the thing, right? So he went to jail for like 8 months, and then he gets out, and then the first fucking place he goes, right back there. I'm like, you fucking stupid, mate.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
my point is like you get crabby, and you just most people would think, people smarter than me would think, oh, I might get stabbed here, I'm not going to do it. And me, I'm like, oh, fuck him.
no, I think you've got to have that. You've got to have that objective, that righteous indignation. You've got to just your brain switches where it's like, like almost like a Klingon, like today is a good day to die, or I would sometimes switch it to think like instead of thinking today's a good day to die, it's like I hope I don't have to take a life today. Whereas that way, it's an active mentality of like I'm going to fucking take this cunt's life, like but I don't want to. But he's put me in this situation, so you have to get that switch. But also what you're saying before, I think if we quote Dalton from Roadhouse in the sense that, those who are prepared for trouble don't, go out looking for trouble. And I think that's the main thing when you're prepared for, because it's normally the people that are going out of their way to start trouble. They're the predators. Like they're the ones that are ill-disciplined. They're the ones that act in groups. Because generally, like training and certain mentalities, there's discipline. There's a dignity in discipline. Discipline is a framework of principles and all this sort of stuff. Whereas people that don't have any discipline, they're the reckless ones. They're the one getting drunk, having 8 balls. They're carrying knives on them, or they hide in groups and wear costumes and all this sort of shit. But they got no dignity and they're disciplined. And then they're the ones that are dangerous. They're the reckless ones. Generally speaking, that's how it always plays out.
They are dangerous. All good, brother. I just thought I would. I really appreciate it, and this was a great chat. I really enjoyed it. We've definitely got to get you back on in the future, and we'll have either we can have Coleman or we can get Dan Severin or something.
That'd be sweet. Awesome.
We can have a bit of a group chat. I think that'd be fantastic.
Done. I look forward to it.
All right, brother. And I really appreciate it, brother. Anytime, and for the lads, we appreciate you sticking around and watching another episode. If you've made it all the way to the end, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Thanks,
see you, mate.